Welcome to Calming Bedtime Journeys channel. Tonight we step into a medieval evening where the air has turned sharp enough to sting your cheeks, and the coming night may fall below freezing. What would you do if there were no thermostat, no electric blanket, no reliable glass windows, and no friendly little button that makes the room behave itself? You would listen closely. You would smell the smoke before you saw the fire. You would notice every gap in the wall, every damp thread in your sleeve, every precious stick of wood stacked by the door. Medieval winter survival was slow, practical, repetitive, and deeply physical. The secret was not one heroic invention, but 1,000 small habits, repeated by tired hands. So, before you settle into the story, take a second to like the video and hit subscribe. And while the room grows quiet, tell us in the comments where you are listening from and what your local time is. Now, dim the lights and come with me toward the last warmth of day. You are walking along a narrow lane as evening settles over a village. The mud underfoot has hardened into ridges. Frost gathers in the hollows, pale and powdery, like flour spilled by a careless baker. Smoke rises from low roofs, then bends sideways when wind pushes across the fields. It smells of oak, straw, damp thatch, and yesterday's cooking. A dog barks once, then stops. The cold is not yet at its worst, but everyone understands its intention. It waits beyond the hedges and beneath the eaves. It slips through loose shutters with the patience of a tax collector. Medieval people knew that cold became dangerous after sunset. Night did not simply mean darkness. In winter, night meant calculation. Inside one cottage, a woman bends near the hearth. Her fingers are red from washing turnips in cold water. A man enters with an armful of sticks, brushing snow from his shoulder. A child carries scraps of brushwood. Proud of the burden, though half trails behind. Nobody speaks grandly about survival. They simply do the next necessary thing. The first rule is fire before darkness. A familiar historical truth is that fuel shaped household life as much as food did. Wood, peat, charcoal, brush, dung, and straw could all become heat, depending on region and wealth. In many places, gathering fuel was restricted by custom, lordship, woodland rights, and season. A fallen branch might be useful, but it might also belong to someone important. That is inconvenient when your toes are becoming philosophical. You stand near the doorway and watch the pile being sorted. Larger logs are saved for the heart of the night. If the household owns such luxury, smaller twigs catch quickly, flare brightly, and vanish almost insultingly fast. Damp wood smokes and spits, filling the room with a sour smell. Dry wood is better, naturally, so it has to be protected like treasure. The hearth is not a modern fireplace. In many humbler homes, it is an open place on the floor or against a wall. Smoke climbs upward toward a hole, a louver, or whatever exit the building grudgingly provides. Some escapes, some stays. Your eyes water, and your throat feels coated. The room is warmer than outside. Yes, but medieval comfort often arrived with a cough still. The fire changes everything. Its light turns the walls amber. Its crackle softens the wind beyond the door. The cooking pot hangs over it, dark from years of use, nearby. Shoes are placed to dry, but not too close, because scorching your only footwear is a mistake one prefers to make exactly 0 times. Steam rises from wet wool, carrying a smell of sheep, smoke, and honest labour. You move closer, palms forward, feeling heat on your skin. Your back remains cold. That is an old winter arrangement. Front warm, back chilly, dignity uncertain. A person could rotate gently like a cautious chicken, and many probably did, although no monk carefully illustrated that part. One curious household trick, known unevenly from later records and scattered references, was portable warmth. People might heat stones, bricks, covered pans, or small vessels near the fire. Wealthier households eventually used more formal bed warmers. Poorer families improvised with objects that held heat safely enough. A warmed stone could become a mercy under bedding, provided it did not scorch cloth or skin. Researchers still differ on how widespread such tricks were across medieval Europe. Household habits rarely announce themselves in grand chronicles. Kings, battles, and bishops left records with enthusiasm. A tired peasant warming cold feet left fewer documents, which seems inconsiderate to future historians, but perfectly reasonable at midnight. Now the household prepares for what the fire must do. It must cook supper, it must dry damp clothing, it must give light for small repairs, it must warm bodies before sleep, it must leave enough embers for morning. Because starting fire from nothing can be slow, irritating, and cold work. The man kneels and draws coals together. Ash shifts with a soft hush. Sparks lift, bright as tiny insects, then vanish in the smoke. The woman feeds the flame carefully, not generously. Generosity belongs to summer stories. Winter requires judgment. You feel the floor through your shoes. It holds the day's cold. Rushes or straw may cover parts of it, mixed with herbs if fortune allows. They soften steps and absorb spills, but they are not magic. Damp creeps upward. The cottage breathes through its cracks. A thin line of light at the door becomes a thin line of cold after sunset. The door is pushed shut. A wooden bar slides into place. Cloth, straw, or old sacking is pressed where wind enters too boldly. Shutters close over the window opening. If there is horn, oiled cloth, or small panes among wealthier households, they help more than an empty gap. Yet light and air still negotiate with weather, and weather usually has excellent lawyers. The fire becomes the centre of the room's small universe. People drift toward it without needing to be told. The child sits nearest, until someone gently moves them back from sparks. The older woman takes a place where heat reaches her knees. The man stretches his hands and studies the woodpile with the seriousness of a banker, reviewing poor investments. Outside, the temperature drops. Inside, survival has already begun. It is not a single act, but a rhythm. Gather before dark, close the gaps, dry what is wet, eat something warm, keep your head covered, share space, save the coals. Remember that morning is far away, but not impossible. You listen as the wind touches the thatch. It combs through the roof in a low, restless whisper. Somewhere beyond the wall, an animal shifts in its stall. The smell of smoke that thickens, then thins when the draft changes. Your cheeks feel warm. Your feet do not. Medieval winter is a careful compromise, and your body keeps the accounts. As the fire settles into a steadier burn, the room becomes quieter, voices lower, the pot murmurs, a spoon knocks softly against its rim. The last daylight has gone from the doorway, leaving only firelight and shadow. You understand that medieval people survived freezing nights not because homes were always warm, but because habits were disciplined. They lived close to risk. They also lived close to one another. The embers glow like a red garden under grey ash. Someone adds one last piece of wood, then pauses to judge whether it is worth another. That pause says everything. Heat is life, but fuel is future heat. Spend too much now, and the hour before dawn becomes cruel. Spend too little, and sleep may never truly arrive. So you settle nearer to the hearth, where the fire's breath brushes your face. Behind you, darkness presses against the walls. Ahead of you, supper waits, clothing steams, and the night begins its long, cold test. For now, at least. Flame holds the centre. You remain close to the hearth a little longer, but your attention begins to move outward. Fire is the glowing heart of the room, yet walls decide how much that heart can matter. A flame may work bravely all night. But a bad wall can make it look foolish. Medieval cold loved poor construction. It found every seam, every crack, every careless joint, and every hopeful little patch of straw. So you turn from the embers and study the cottage itself. The walls around you are not one simple thing in some regions. They might be timber frames packed with wattle and daub. In others, rough stone rises thick and heavy from the frozen ground. Elsewhere, clay, turf, cob, planks, reeds, or packed earth do the best they can. Medieval Europe was never one single stage set. It was a patchwork of local materials, local skills, and local weather, all arguing quietly under the same winter sky. A basic historical fact is that most ordinary homes were built from what stood nearby. Forested areas leaned toward timber, while uplands and rocky districts often used stone. River valleys might offer clay, reeds, or thatching materials. Transport was difficult and expensive, so your wall was often a story about your landscape. Convenient, unless your landscape had a poor sense of insulation. You step closer to a timber wall and touch it. The surface is cool and uneven. The wooden posts are darkened by age, smoke, and handling between them. Woven sticks hold a mixture of mud, straw, dung, clay, hair, or lime, depending on place and means. This daub has been smoothed by hand, repaired many times, and probably insulted during bad weather. It keeps out wind better than nothing. Tonight, better than nothing is an honourable achievement. The air smells of damp clay and smoke somewhere along the lower edge. Cold slides inward. It is not a dramatic gust. It is a sly, steady movement. The kind that makes ankles feel personally targeted. Someone notices and pushes a bundle of straw into the gap. The straw scratches against the floor, and the draft weakens. Though it does not surrender, nothing truly surrenders in winter. In a wealthier house, you might find thicker masonry, plastered walls, better shutters, and more rooms. That sounds comforting, and sometimes it is. Yet stone keeps cold with impressive loyalty. A stone chamber can feel like sleeping inside a polite cave. It blocks wind well, but it also absorbs chill, holds dampness, and returns both slowly through the night. Prestige, unfortunate though, is not the same as warmth. You imagine touching such a wall. Your fingers meet stone that feels almost wet with cold. The room may contain a fireplace, a rush-covered floor, and wall hangings, yet the chill still lingers behind the fabric. Tapestries were not only decoration in grand homes. They helped soften drafts and added a thin barrier between human skin and freezing masonry. Beautiful pictures, useful insulation. Medieval interior design did enjoy multitasking. A less familiar tidbit is that wall coverings could serve as portable comfort. Wealthy households often moved textiles, hangings, bedding, and furnishings between residences. Warmth followed possessions as much as architecture. If a lord moved, his comfort travelled in carts, bundled in cloth, tied with rope, and probably complained about by servants. Even luxury needed hauling. Back in the cottage, the roof above you rustles faintly. Thatch lies thick over the rafters, layered from straw, reeds, heather, or rushes. A good thatched roof can insulate surprisingly well when maintained properly. It traps air inside its layers, which is precisely what a cold night dislikes. But poor thatch leaks, rots, harbours pests, and sheds fragments into daily life. Comfort often arrives with maintenance, and maintenance never sleeps. You hear tiny sounds overhead. Perhaps it is the wind, perhaps it is a mouse, perhaps it is both, holding a small committee meeting in the roof. Medieval homes were rarely sealed from nature in the modern sense. Birds, insects, rodents, smokes, very damp, and weather belonged near the edge of domestic life. The boundary between indoors and outdoors was real, but not absolute. The house protected you, yet it also reminded you that Earth was close. Scholars continue to debate how warm ordinary medieval interiors actually felt during severe winters. Archaeology can reveal hearths, wall remains, floor layers, and building materials. Documents can mention fuel, rent, repairs, or timber rights, but the exact feeling of a room at midnight is harder to recover. Temperature leaves fewer records than taxes, which is typical of temperature and deeply unhelpful. Still, you can feel enough. Your breath does not fog thickly inside, because the fire keeps the air moving, yet the corners remain cold. The wall farthest from the hearth seems to belong to another season. Near the door, the draught returns whenever wind presses from the lane. The shutter rattles softly. A child glances toward it, then back to the fire, as if the shutter has said something rude. The door is a serious matter. It is made of planks, sometimes heavy, sometimes simple, with ironwork if the household can afford it. Gaps around it are common enough. A leather hinge creaks, or an iron hinge complains more sharply. At night the bar is set across it. This keeps out animals, thieves, neighbours with poor timing, and some wind, not all wind. Wind is persistent. A strip of cloth hangs along one side. Someone has stuffed moss into a crack near the threshold. Old sacking lies rolled like a tired animal against the base. You can smell old earth there, mixed with smoke and damp wool. Your feet sense the weakness before your eyes fully accept it. Medieval winter often enters from below, where dignity rarely looks. Windows are even more delicate. In a poor dwelling, a window may be a small opening closed by a wooden shutter. It offers light by day and trouble by night. Oiled cloth, scraped horn, thin parchment, or wooden lattice may help in certain places. Glass exists, but for ordinary people it is limited, precious, and not always part of daily domestic life. Sunlight has a price so does air. When the shutter closes, the room dims, firelight becomes more important, shadows lean upward along the wall beams, smoke gathers briefly, then slips toward the roof opening. The atmosphere thickens with breath, heat, stew, animals, damp clothes, and old straw. It is not fresh, it is alive. The house is breathing with you. You begin to understand that medieval shelter was not about creating perfect warmth. It was about reducing danger. Walls slowed the wind, roofs softened snow and rain, shutters guarded openings, floor coverings lifted feet from cold earth, hangings made chambers kinder. Every barrier mattered, even imperfect ones, because winter's strength came through accumulation. One crack chills your toes, 5 cracks chill your legs, a wet wall chills the room, a leaking roof chills the bedding, a bad door steals the heat you spent an hour making. Small failures gather in the dark, and people learn to notice them before night becomes cruel. So you watch the household perform its quiet inspection. A hand presses against daub, a thumb tests a shutter latch, a shoulder leans into the door, straw is moved, cloth is adjusted, the fire is fed with care. None of this is dramatic, yet all of it belongs to survival. Outside, frost thickens on the lane. Inside, the cottage holds its breath against the cold. It is smoky, cramped, uneven, and imperfect. It is also shelter. The walls do not defeat winter, but they bargain with it. And on a night below freezing, even a fragile bargain can carry you closer to morning. From the walls, your attention returns to your own body, because shelter is only one layer of survival. The cottage holds back some wind, the hearth gives uneven warmth, yet the cold still reaches for you. Politely at first, then with the rude confidence of winter. Medieval people did not survive freezing nights by trusting one barrier. They stacked defences. And the most personal defence was clothing. You lower your gaze to what you're wearing. The first layer nearest the skin is usually linen, if your household can afford it. A simple shift, smock, shirt, or undergarment absorbs sweat and protects outer wool from the body's daily dampness. Linen feels cooler at first, smoother than rough wool, and easier to wash. That matters in a smoky house where everything slowly begins smelling like fire, sheep, onions, and life choices. Over it comes wool. This is the great medieval winter friend. A well-known historical fact is that wool was central to clothing across much of medieval Europe. It could be spun, woven, fulled, dyed, patched, and layered in many practical ways, even when damp. Wool keeps some insulating power, which makes it unusually useful in cold. Wet climates, it scratches, certainly, but survival rarely arrives wearing silk. You pull a wool tunic closer around your body. The fabric is thick, slightly greasy, and heavy from wear. It smells faintly of smoke and animal fat. The sleeves hang long enough to cover your wrists when you tuck your hands inside, around your waist. A belt gathers loose cloth and traps warmer air near your body. Fashion and physics have reached an agreement. A draft touches your neck. That is why the hood matters. A hood, coif, cap, veil, wimple, or wrapped cloth helps protect the head and neck, where cold feels especially determined. Medieval people often covered their heads indoors as well as outdoors. Modern people may imagine hats as outdoor objects, but a freezing room laughs gently at that idea. Indoors is only truly indoors if it behaves itself. Tonight, it does not. You draw the hood forward, sound changes at once. The crackle of the fire grows softer, and the wind outside becomes more muffled. Your own breathing feels closer. The cloth brushes your cheek with a dry rasp. Warmth gathers at the back of your neck, and you understand why bareheaded pride had limited value in January. Your legs need their own strategy. Hose, chausses, leggings, or wrapped cloth cover the lower body, depending on the period, place, gender, and social rank. Feet may be wrapped in cloth before slipping into shoes. In some households, extra rags become winter necessities, tied around ankles or stuffed where cold finds space. It is not elegant, it is effective enough. One small tidbit, more practical than glamorous, is that people sometimes slept wearing clothing they might not remove fully at night. Modern bedtime often suggests softness, cleanliness, and special garments. Medieval winter could suggest keeping your tunic on, adding a cloak, and becoming a human bundle with opinions. Privacy was limited, warmth mattered more. You stand near the hearth and feel the layers begin to work. They do not create heat by magic. They trap what your body makes. That simple fact controls everything. If you go to bed cold, hungry, and damp, clothing has less warmth to hold. If you warm yourself first, eat something, and keep fabric dry, your layers perform far better. Medieval survival often began before sleep began. People knew this without using modern terms. A woman lifts a cloak from a peg and shakes it once. Dust and old smoke rise from the folds. The cloak is broad, useful, and slightly stiff from weather. She wraps it around an older man's shoulders, tucking one edge across his chest. He grunts, which may mean thanks, complaint, or both. Medieval communication had many efficient forms. The cloak becomes a wool you can wear. It covers gaps left by tunic and belt. It can be pulled over knees near the fire. It can serve as a blanket later. If bedding is thin, in travel, it may become shelter. Bedding, cushion, curtain, and portable dignity. A good cloak is not just clothing, it is a small household with a clasp. Researchers remain uncertain about many details of everyday clothing among poorer people, because worn garments were reused until they vanished from records. Cloth could be patched, cut down, handed to children, turned into wrappings, or finally used as rags. Archaeologists sometimes find textile fragments in damp or sealed conditions, but ordinary daily wear often disappears. The poor left fewer closets for history to open. Still, the logic is visible in surviving images, accounts, and finds. Layering was common because it was flexible. If you work near the fire, you loosened garments. If you stepped outside, you tightened them. If you slept in a cold room, you added coverings. If the baby stirred, you wrapped the baby again. Winter demanded constant adjustment, which is annoying, but less annoying than freezing. Your hands are next. Mittens are warmer than gloves because fingers share heat. Gloves exist, especially for work, status, and protection. But ordinary cold often favours simple enclosed coverings. Some people use cloth wraps, old sleeves, or fur-lined pieces if available. Your fingers curl into your palm. You can feel how quickly exposed skin loses comfort when the room cools. The hearth snaps. A spark leaps and dies on the packed floor. Someone lifts wet stockings or hose from a peg, checking whether they have dried enough for morning. The smell is powerful, but this is not a delicate age. Damp foot coverings can ruin a winter day. Frozen shoes are worse, so people dry them carefully, balancing closeness to heat against the danger of burning leather. A child sits with knees tucked under a tunic. Their head is covered, their hands hidden, their body making the smallest shape possible. This is instinct and wisdom together. A smaller shape loses less heat. The child does not need a lecture on surface area. Cold teaches directly, with little patience and excellent attendance. You sit too, drawing your cloak around your legs beneath the wool. You feel warmth gather slowly. It is not instant. Medieval comfort often takes time. The body warms the trapped air. The layers hold it. The fire helps from one side, the room steals from the other. You become a little argument between heat and loss. For wealthier people, fur might line garments or edge hoods and mantles. Squirrel, rabbit, lambskin, fox, and other furs appear in medieval clothing records, though access varied widely. Fur could be warmth, fashion, and status at once. Among the poor, sheepskins or rougher hides might be more likely if available. Nothing says social hierarchy quite like being warmer than your neighbour. Yet even fine clothing had limits. If fabric became wet, if wind entered sleeves, if the wearer was underwhelmed, or if sleep lasted too long without heat. Cold returned. Layers were powerful, not miraculous. They worked best as part of the larger system you've already seen: walls, shutters, hearth, fuel, food, bedding, and shared space. The household settles closer together now. Wool brushes wool, linen cuffs peek from sleeves, a cloak is passed to someone shivering, a cap is pulled lower over grey hair. The room sounds softer beneath all this fabric, as if winter itself has been muffled. Outside, frost grips the lane. Inside, the people turn themselves into layered, breathing bundles. You feel the wisdom of it in your own shoulders. Keep dry, cover the head, protect the feet, trap air, share warmth, move before stiffness takes hold, save your best layers for the coldest hours. None of these habits needs drama. They are simple, repeated, and deeply human. The fire glows lower, and the shadows lengthen behind the beams. You wrap the cloak tighter, listening to the wind test the shutter again. It finds the crack, but not your skin, so easily now. Between your body and the freezing night lie linen, wool, hood, hose, cloak, and the quiet intelligence of generations. The wool around your shoulders has begun to hold a little warmth, and now the hearth calls your attention again. Not as a bright object only, but as the small kingdom around which everyone quietly arranges the evening. The walls bargain with winter. Clothing protects the body. Yet the hearth commands the room, because it feeds, warms, lights, dries, and gathers the household into one breathing circle. You sit near it carefully, not too close. Of course, a medieval hearth is generous, but it is also moody. Sparks leap without warning. Smoke changes direction for reasons known only to draughts and bad luck. A pot may boil over, sending a hiss into the embers. The air smells of ash, wet wool, onions, old straw, and wood smoke. It is not perfume, unless your standards have been lowered by January. The fire burns on a prepared surface of clay, stone, or packed earth. In many simple homes, there is no elegant raised fireplace. The hearth may sit near the middle of the room or against a wall, with smoke escaping through a roof opening, hood, or chimney if one exists. A well-known feature of medieval domestic life is that hearth design varied greatly by region, period, and wealth. You hear the fire before you understand it fully. Twigs crack, a larger piece settles with a soft thump. The pot chain creaks overhead. Someone shifts a stool across the floor, and the straw underfoot whispers. The whole room seems tuned to the hearth's rhythm, as if flame has become the household clock. Near the fire, work continues. A woman stirs the pot with slow, practical movements. The spoon scrapes the bottom, then circles through thickening pottage. A child holds out damp mittens, trying to dry them without burning them. An older man turns a shoe, judging the leather with suspicious eyes. Footwear is precious. Nobody wishes to begin morning with one shoe shaped like a roasted turnip. A small oddity worth noticing is the careful use of fire tools and cooking supports. Hooks, chains, trivets, spits, fire doors, and iron pots could be valuable household goods. Even modest families might own a few essential objects for managing flame and food. Metalwork was durable, useful, and worth protecting. A pot could outlast many moods, many winters, and several arguments about who dented it. The hearth also decides where people sit. The strongest heat reaches only so far. Those nearest it may be children, elders, the ill, or the person doing the cooking. Others take what warmth remains. Rank, need, habit, and affection all appear in the seating arrangement. You can learn much from who is allowed the warmest place. You notice this without anyone explaining it. The oldest woman sits with her knees toward the glow. Her hands rest under her cloak, hidden like small sleeping birds. A younger man stays farther back, mending a strap by firelight. He leans in when he needs to see the hole, then retreats when smoke pushes toward him. The child drifts forward again, and again someone tugs them back. The room is smoky, but the smoke has uses beyond annoyance. It helps preserve hanging foods, discourages some pests, darkens beams, and reminds every object who is in charge. Meat, herbs, tools, baskets, and clothes may hang in the upper shadows. The roof timbers carry years of blackened history. If walls could speak, these would cough first. Some specialists remain cautious about reconstructing exact hearth behaviour in ordinary homes. Surviving buildings, archaeological traces, and later customs provide clues, but daily practice differed widely. A hearth in a northern upland cottage did not behave like one in a warmer valley. A town house differed from a peasant dwelling. Evidence glows, but it does not always burn evenly still. The basic pattern is clear enough. Fire organised the night. You watch as fuel is added with restraint. Earlier, the household guarded its woodpile. Now the same careful habit continues. A small stick feeds the cooking flame. A thicker piece waits for later. Ash is pushed to one side, not wasted. Embers are not mere leftovers. They are tomorrow's beginning, sleeping under grey cover. The pot begins to breathe more heavily. Steam rises and mingles with smoke, softening the smell of damp clothing. Your stomach notices at once. Warm food is not only nourishment, it is internal fear. The hearth heats the room unevenly, but supper carries warmth into the body, where it can be held beneath linen and wool. A clay cup is placed near the edge to warm, not too near. Everything near medieval fire lives in a delicate argument between useful heat and complete disaster. The cup grows warmer. A loaf rests nearby, its crust hard and dark. Someone turns it so one side does not become sadly heroic. You feel the warmth on your face, your back remains cooler, and the floor still holds the day's frost. Yet the hearth creates a zone of safety. It is a circle, not a whole room. Inside that circle, hands loosen, shoulders drop, and voices settle. Outside it, darkness gathers along the walls, waiting patiently behind stools, chests, and hanging cloth. The firelight changes faces, it softens lines, deepens eye sockets, and turns ordinary movement ceremonial. Stirring the pot looks ancient because it is ancient. Feeding the flames looks simple because it has been practiced countless times. The person who tends the fire becomes, for a few hours, the keeper of everyone's comfort. That responsibility is heavy. Too much smoke, and eyes sting, too little flame, and supper stays thin and cold. Too much fuel, and the dawn will suffer. Too little, and night grows hard. The hearth demands judgment, and judgment comes from memory. You learn by watching elders, by feeling drafts, by wasting wood once and hearing about it forever. A cat appears near the edge of the room, choosing warmth with professional seriousness. It steps over straw, avoids the child, and curls where heat reaches, but sparks do not. This may be the wisest creature present. Medieval households often shared space with animals of many kinds, not always by choice, but sometimes with practical benefit. Even the cat understands the hearth's kingdom. Outside, the wind lifts again. The shutter knocks once, everyone hears it, but nobody turns for long. The fire has trained their attention inward. It tells them that the night can be endured in portions. First supper, then drying, then banking embers, then bedding, then the coldest hours, when the room seems to shrink and breathing sounds louder. You watch the flames sink lower beneath the pot. The bright tips fold into orange beds. Smoke thins for a moment, and the smell of food becomes clearer. There is grain in it, an onion, and something earthy from the store basket. The room feels almost peaceful. If you do not ask too much of the word, almost is enough tonight. The hearth does not make medieval winter comfortable in the modern sense. It makes it manageable. It gives tasks, light, sound, smell, warmth, and a place to gather. It turns a cold room into a human room. It reminds everyone where survival begins and where it must be protected until morning. So you stay within its amber circle, listening to the pot murmur and the wind search the walls. The hearth glows like a small sun lowered into earth, imperfect and smoky, but loyal for now, around it. The household prepares to eat, dry, mend, remember, and wait. The hearth has pulled everyone inward, and now the evening meal begins to matter more deeply. Warmth from flame touches skin, but food carries heat where cloaks cannot reach. You feel this as the pot thickens above the fire, breathing steam into the smoky room. Outside, frost tightens over the yard. Inside, hunger becomes quieter, because supper is almost ready. You sit close enough to feel the glow on your face. The pot gives off a smell of grain, onions, leeks, and roots from the winter store. It is not a feast, but it is steady. The mixture is soft, heavy, and practical, made for filling the belly rather than impressing anyone. Medieval food had many festive moments, certainly, but freezing nights belonged to usefulness. Pottage did not need applause, it needed to be hot. One practical reality of medieval life is that many ordinary households relied heavily on grains, legumes, vegetables, ale, dairy, and preserved foods. Meat might appear at times, especially salted, smoked or in small amounts, but daily diets varied by region, season, wealth, and religious rules. Bread and pottage formed a deep foundation for many people. A warm bowl could mean the difference between shivering wakefulness and something closer to sleep. The spoon dips into the pot. You hear the slow scrape against the bottom, then the soft sound of thick food poured into wooden bowls. Steam rises in pale threads. A child leans forward too quickly and is warned back. Hot food it is precious. But burned fingers teach with unnecessary enthusiasm. The bowl reaches your hands, and its warmth seeps into your palms before you taste anything. That first warmth matters. You lift the bowl closer and smell the earth, smoke, and cooked grain. The taste is mild, salty if fortune allows, perhaps sharpened by onion or herbs if peas or beans are present. They give more weight if there is a scrap of bacon, salt fish, dripping, cheese rind or old broth. The household is lucky tonight. Small flavours do enormous work when the weather is cruel. A hard piece of bread is passed around. It may be coarse, dark, and made from rye, barley, maslin, oats, or wheat if wealth permits. You tear it carefully, softening it in the hot pottage. The crust resists at first, then gives way. Your teeth meet grit from milling, a familiar medieval inconvenience. Nobody invites the millstone dust, but it attends dinner anyway. A curious food detail hides inside the cup beside you. Ale, small beer, cider, watered wine, milk, or whey might appear, depending on place and household. In many regions, weak ale was a normal daily drink, not a grand indulgence. It offered calories and safer storage than some water sources. Also, it made winter conversations slightly more forgiving, which should not be ignored. You sip from a warmed cup. The liquid is not hot like modern tea, but it has taken the chill from the cup's rim. Your mouth notices, your throat softens, the body begins making its own quiet heat from the meal. This is the hidden fire of food, slower than flame, steadier than sparks. A person who goes to sleep hungry faces the night with fewer defences. Some researchers remain careful when describing exact medieval diets, because evidence comes from many unequal sources. Elite household accounts list impressive stores and purchases, while poorer meals appear less clearly. Archaeological plant remains, animal bones, teeth, cooking vessels, and written records all help, yet a specific bowl on a specific freezing night still leaves room for uncertainty. Even so, the rhythm feels convincing. Supper is not separate from survival, it is part of the same winter system as walls. Wool and embers, calories keep the body warm, salted foods extend summer into winter. Stored roots and dried peas make the cold season livable. Dairy, if available, adds richness. Fat is valuable because it fuels work and warmth. In cold weather, hunger sharpens quickly. The older woman eats slowly, holding the bowl near her lap. Her fingers curl around its sides. Her eyes half close as steam brushes her face. The man with the strap eats faster, then wipes the bowl with bread. The child watches him and copies the movement with solemn importance. Medieval children learned manners and survival at the same table, usually while being told not to spill. A pot meal also saves fuel. Boiling several ingredients together over one fire is efficient. It cooks supper while warming the room and softening stale bread. Nothing glamorous happens, which is exactly the point. Glamour burns wood. Pottage mines the budget. Outside, wind presses the shutter. Inside, spoons move quietly. The room grows thick with the sound of eating, breathing, and the occasional crack from the fire. You can hear a cow shift beyond a partition or in a nearby byre. Somewhere a drop of melted snow falls from clothing into straw. The smell of smoke settles into everything. If tomorrow had a scent, it would probably be this one. Food storage sits at the edge of every winter meal. You imagine the household supplies tucked into chests, baskets, crocks, loft spaces, barrels, or pits. Grain must be protected from damp and vermin. Cheese must be guarded from mould that is not invited. Salted meat and fish must be watched. Apples may shrivel, onions may sprout. Turnips and cabbages must endure their own slow argument with rot. That is medieval winter arithmetic. Every bowl eaten tonight has been taken from tomorrow's store. Every generous ladle is weighed against the week still waiting. Hunger is not only an empty stomach, it is also a calendar. People know how long the cold season can stretch, especially when harvests have been poor. The meal warms you now, but the household thinks beyond now. Records from medieval towns and estates often reveal concern over grain prices, shortages, rents, and obligations. A hard winter could make food more expensive and movement harder. Frozen roads, blocked paths, and storms might separate people from markets or mills. A sack of grain is useful only if you can grind, cook, and protect it. Winter enjoys adding steps. You take another spoonful. It is warmer at the centre than at the edges. The bowl cools quickly in the cold air, so you eat before the night stills too much. The pottage sits heavy and comforting in your stomach. Your hands feel less stiff. Your shoulders loosen under the wool. The fire in the hearth and the fire inside you begin to cooperate. The household does not waste the remnants. A little liquid may be saved. Scraps might feed animals, thicken another meal, or vanish into the mouth of someone still hungry. Bowls are wiped, not casually abandoned. In a freezing season, waste feels almost immoral. Even crumbs possess dignity when the larder is uncertain. A small silence follows supper. Not empty silence, but the drowsy kind that rises after warm food. The fire is lowered. The pot hangs black and satisfied above the embers. Smoke threads upward. The child's eyes grow heavy. The older woman adjusts her cloak again, trapping the meal's warmth beneath wool. You feel it too. The body has been given fuel. Beyond the door, the night has deepened into hard cold. Yet inside, the simple meal has changed the room. People are still sore or tired or worried, but they are warmer than before. Their hands have held bowls. Their stomachs carry heat. Their breath slows a little in the smoky air. The hearth will soon be banked. Bedding will be arranged. The coldest hours are still ahead, waiting without mercy or hurry. But for now, the household has taken one more step toward morning, spoon by spoon, bowl by bowl, with pottage, bread, and the humble strength of food that warms slowly. Supper settles warmly inside you, and the household begins turning from food towards sleep. This is not a quick change. Medieval bedtime is a slow rearrangement of bodies. Tools, embers, animals, cloth, and hope. The fire has done its evening work. The pot has been moved aside. Now the question becomes quieter and more serious. Where will everyone lie when the room grows colder? You watch bedding being prepared. For the fortunate, sleep begins above the floor. That single detail matters greatly. A bed raised on a wooden frame, rope support, boards, or a simple platform keeps the body away from the coldest layer of air. Floors can hold damp, frost, dirt, and drafts. Even a small height changes the night. Medieval comfort often begins with not sleeping directly where the mud remembers being mud. A well-attested feature of medieval households is the use of straw. Hay, rushes, wool, skins, and textiles for bedding. The rich might enjoy mattresses stuffed with wool, feathers, or down. Ordinary people more often use straw-filled sacks, coarse blankets, cloaks, and whatever coverings the household could spare. The difference between those worlds could be enormous. Sleep, like bread, had a hierarchy. You approach a straw mattress near the wall. It rustles when someone turns it. The sound is dry, whispery, and faintly alive. Straw has a clean, grassy smell when fresh. But older bedding carries smoke, sweat, dust, and winter damp. It may poke through cloth with tiny, unreasonable ambitions. Still, straw traps air and lifts the body from harder surfaces. It is humble, replaceable, and useful. A better bed might include a mattress filled with wool, softer, warmer, less prickly. A finer household might have feather bedding, linen sheets, quilts, coverlets, fur-lined throws, and curtains. Such luxury does not mean tropical ease, but it changes everything. A person surrounded by heavy textiles is defended from drafts, cold walls, and the bleak emotional experience of touching a frozen blanket with bare toes. That is a serious experience. Bed curtains deserve special attention. In wealthier chambers, curtains around a bed create a warmer pocket of air. They also offer privacy in crowded households, where rooms are shared by servants, guests, children, and kin. The curtain does not heat the bed by itself, it traps breath, body heat, and stillness. It is a small room within a cold room. A small oddity worth noticing is that some beds were valuable possessions listed carefully in wills and inventories. Beds could include frames, mattresses, bolsters, pillows, sheets, blankets, coverlets, and hangings. These were not casual objects, they represented wealth, comfort, status, and survival. A good bed could be inherited, moved, repaired, and guarded in winter. It was almost a treasure chest you slept inside. You look at the bedding in the cottage. No grand curtains hang here. Instead, blankets are shaken out and layered. A cloak becomes an extra covering. A sheepskin is placed where an older body will sleep. A straw sack is pulled closer to the warmest wall, though warmest is a generous word. The wall is less cruel than the others. In January, that counts as kindness. The wool blankets feel heavy in your hands. Their fibres catch against dry skin. They smell of lanolin, smoke, and old storage. When spread across bedding, they settle with a thick, muffled softness. Heavy blankets do more than cover. They press the body down, closing gaps where cold air might creep. The weight itself can feel calming, as if winter has been politely asked to wait outside. Not that winter listens well. People warm bedding before lying down when they can. A cloth may be placed near the fire, a stone or brick may be heated, wrapped, and carried carefully. A pan of embers, handled with extreme caution, might be used in some later or wealthier settings to take the chill from sheets. The principle is simple. Never let the bed steal the heat you spent all evening collecting. Experts remain cautious about how common each warming method was in earlier medieval homes. Some practices are better documented in later periods, while others likely existed in simpler forms. Archaeology rarely finds a moment when someone tucked a warm stone into cloth. But human dislike of cold feet is ancient, persuasive, and difficult to overestimate. You touch the straw mattress again. It has absorbed some warmth from the room, but not much. The outer blanket feels cool. The inner layers will warm slowly under bodies. The first few moments in bed may be unpleasant. The body enters like a brave explorer entering hostile territory. Then fabric, breath, and stillness begin their patient work. The household prepares with care. Shoes are set where they may be found in darkness. Wet things stay near the hearth, but not dangerously near. Hoods and caps remain on heads. Some clothing stays on. A belt may be loosened, but layers are not abandoned simply because night has arrived. This is not a world where everyone changes into delicate white sleeping garments and sighs gracefully by candlelight. That is lovely. It is also optimistic. A child is wrapped first. Their small body loses heat quickly, so coverings are tucked under and around them. The older woman receives extra wool near her feet. A man folds his cloak lengthwise and lays it over the lower half of the bed. No one says much. The room has entered the quiet grammar of sleep. You hear small sounds everywhere. Straw shifts, cloth drags over wood. A chest lid closes softly. The fire gives a low crackle. Someone coughs from smoke. Wind presses against the shutter, then falls away. The smell of supper fades beneath ash and wool. The air cools at the edges, but the bedding promises a smaller climate, one built from fabric and patience. In a prosperous manor or townhouse, this same hour would feel different. Servants might carry warming pans, arrange sheets, close bed curtains, and set candles safely aside. The bed might stand in a chamber apart from the hall, with painted walls or hanging textiles. Pillows might lift the head, while quilts and featherbeds soften the body, yet even there, night below freezing could creep through stone and timber. Wealth improved the bargain. It did not cancel winter. For poorer households, bedding could be painfully thin. People slept on benches, pallets, straw heaps, floor coverings, or shared sacks. A cloak might be the difference between rest and shivering. A dry blanket might matter more than privacy. The fortunate had layers to choose from. The unlucky had whatever remained after day work. Rain, smoke, and poverty had taken their portions. You lie down at last in the bedding prepared for you. The first touch is cold enough to tighten your shoulders. Then the wool settles over you. The straw compresses beneath your weight with a soft rasp. Your breath warms the space near your face. The cap over your head keeps heat from fleeing upward. Your feet search for the least cold place, showing impressive determination. Slowly, the bed changes. It stops being an object and becomes shelter. The layers hold the heat from supper, hearth, clothing, and skin. The room beyond the blanket remains dark and smoky. The walls still bargain with frost. The fire has lowered, and shadows climb the rafters, yet beneath wool and straw, you feel a narrow pocket of safety forming. This is how fortunate medieval sleepers survived, not through perfect warmth, but through stored warmth. Raised bedding, dry straw, wool, skins, curtains, shared blankets, covered heads, and warmed objects all helped preserve what the day had nearly spent. Every layer remembered the fire, every fold held back the night. Your eyes grow heavier as the household quiets around you. Someone turns and the straw murmurs. Someone whispers a final word near the hearth. Outside, frost hardens on the threshold. Inside, the bedding gathers its small warmth around your tired body, and the freezing dark waits beyond the blanket's edge. The bedding has gathered around you, and for a few breaths the cottage seems almost still. Then something shifts beyond the inner partition. A hoof scrapes wood. A chain gives a small metallic clink. A warm, heavy smell rolls softly through the room, reminding you that this household is not entirely human. Medieval winter, in many places, is shared with animals. You listen again. There is the slow breath of a cow, the restless shuffle of a goat, perhaps the soft rooting of a pig somewhere nearby. Not every medieval home kept animals under the same roof, and arrangements varied widely by region, class, and building type. Yet in many rural households, livestock lived close to people during harsh weather. Sometimes they occupied a lower level, a byre, a lean-to, or a room divided from the living space. This was not charming in the storybook sense. The smell is strong. Warm hide, manure, damp straw, sour breath, old hay, and smoke mingle in the air. It presses into cloth and hair. You begin to understand why medieval people were not constantly writing poetry about indoor freshness. Freshness was lovely. Certainly, keeping the cow alive was lovelier. One everyday reality of medieval farming was that livestock represented wealth, food, labour, fertiliser, and future survival. A cow could give milk, an ox could pull, sheep gave wool, pigs turned scraps into meat. Goats endured conditions that would make fussier creatures reconsider their life plans. Losing animals in winter could damage a household long after the frost melted. So they were protected. You rise slightly from the bedding and look toward the partition. It may be made from rough planks, woven hurdles, or simple rails. Beyond it, straw covers the floor more thickly. The animal's warmth fills that enclosed space, not like a roaring fire, but like a slow, breathing stove. Body heat from large animals could soften the cold in nearby rooms. It did not make a cottage cosy. It made it less deadly. That difference matters. A lesser-known detail is that some medieval house forms, especially longhouses in parts of northern and western Europe. Placed people and animals under one roof, the animals might occupy one end, sometimes lower than the human living area. Warmth, protection, and convenience all played a role. It also saved building materials. Winter practicality has always enjoyed doing several jobs at once. The cow shifts again. The sound is intimate, almost domestic. Straw crushes under weight. Breath gusts through nostrils. A wooden stall creaks. You smell hay, chewed slowly and patiently in the dark. The animal does not know it is part of a survival strategy. It merely stands, eats, breathes, and contributes a little heat, which is honestly more useful than many committee meetings. Still, keeping animals close brought trouble. Parasites travelled easily, smells thickened the air, floors became dirty, moisture increased, noise disturbed sleep. A restless pig could be a less than poetic companion at midnight. Yet medieval households balanced discomfort against need. Clean separation was easier for those with more space, better buildings, and stronger resources. The evidence grows thinner when we ask exactly how often families slept near animals. Archaeological layouts, regional building traditions, estate records, and later, rural customs all give clues. But daily arrangements could change with weather, season, and necessity. A mild autumn night might differ from a brutal January freeze. People adapted without leaving tidy notes for us. You feel that adaptation now? A child, half asleep under wool, murmurs when the animal moves. Nobody is alarmed. The sound belongs to the house, just as the fire crackles and the shutter rattles. The cow breathes, the rhythm becomes part of the night's music. Low, warm, uneven, alive. Near the byre entrance, a bundle of fodder waits for morning. Hay is precious in winter, because animals cannot graze under snow or on frozen ground. Feeding them means measuring the stored supply carefully. Every mouth matters, including non-human ones. If fodder runs short, the household faces hard choices. Medieval winter is never only about human hunger. You remember the food stores from supper? Grain, roots, cheese, and salted scraps fed people. Hay, straw, chaff, leaves, beans, and other fodder supported animals. Both stores had to last. The cold season tied human and animal survival together in one complicated knot. Milk in spring depended on winter care. Wool next year depended on sheep kept through the frost. The animal warmth is not imagined. Large bodies produce heat constantly, in a closed or semi-closed space. That heat changes the air. Moisture changes it too. Your skin notices a heavier atmosphere near the partition, warmer but less clean. The smell of manure rises with damp straw. You may not love it. Your nose certainly has notes, but your frozen feet are willing to negotiate. Medieval people made such bargains constantly. A hen may roost somewhere inconvenient. A dog may sleep near the threshold. Cats claim the hearth edge, as you saw earlier. With quiet arrogance, animals guard, hunt vermin, provide warning, and steal warmth when allowed. A dog curled near a sleeper can be both companion and blanket, though possibly a snoring one. The line between useful and annoying is an old line. Outside. A fox cries to finish beyond the yard. The cow raises its head. The household pauses, then the sound fades into the winter dark, and the animal settles again. This is another reason to keep livestock close. Predators, thieves, storms, and sudden illness are harder to notice when animals stand far away. A beast inside or nearby can be checked without crossing the frozen yard in darkness. That does not mean anyone enjoys the chore. Before sleeping fully, someone goes to the stall, you hear soft footsteps, then the scrape of a wooden latch. A hand pats a flank. The animal's skin gives a dull, warm sound. The person checks fodder, bedding, and whether the beast seems restless. Their breath clouds faintly near the opening. The smell grows stronger for a moment. Then the partition closes. The room settles again. You lie back under the wool and think of how different this is from modern ideas of a bedroom. Privacy is thin. Air is smoky. Animals are close. Bedding rustles with straw. The hearth glows low, yet every element belongs to a larger pattern. The animal survives because the household protects it. The household survives better because the animal remains alive. It's not sentimental. It is mutual dependence. Records from manors and village life show how important animals were in rents, labour, dues, and household economies. They were counted, valued, taxed, borrowed, stolen, blessed, healed, and mourned when lost in winter. They were not background scenery. They were walking stores of wealth and warmth. A cow in the byre was future milk breathing in the dark. You listen as that breathing deepens. It blends with the soft crackle of buried embers and the wind along the thatch. The room smells layer themselves again: ash, wool, straw, food, damp timber, and animal warmth. Your senses may protest a little, but the night is below freezing. This is not the hour for delicate opinions. The bedding around you now feels less alone. Human bodies rest under blankets. Animal bodies stand behind rough boards. The cottage holds them all in one smoky, imperfect shelter. The walls bargain with frost. The hearth guards its embers. Oh, the livestock breathes heat into the edges of the dark. Outside, the frozen yard lies silent. Inside, survival has hooves, hides, straw, and breath. You close your eyes as the cow shifts once more, and the sound becomes strangely comforting. It says the household still has life in it. It says morning may bring milk, work, manure for fields, and another day's chance for tonight. That is enough. The animals settle behind their partition, and the cottage grows quieter again. Yet the quiet is crowded. You notice it now in every breath, every rustle, every small turning beneath wool. Medieval sleep was rarely a private island. On freezing nights especially, survival often meant closeness, and closeness meant learning to rest beside other warm, inconvenient human beings. You lie under the blanket and feel another shoulder nearby. The contact is not romantic or dramatic. It is practical. Bodies make heat, and heat is too valuable to waste in separate corners. In a room where frost presses at the threshold, shared bedding becomes a form of shelter. A lone sleeper loses warmth quickly. 2 or 3 sleepers, tucked under the same coverings, create a warmer pocket of air. Winter teaches togetherness with very cold fingers. One ordinary feature of medieval domestic life was the crowded household. Parents, children, servants, apprentices, lodgers, kin, and guests might share buildings, rooms, halls, or sleeping spaces. In poorer homes, there might be little choice. In wealthier homes, space existed, but servants and lower status people still slept communally. Privacy, as modern people imagine it, had not yet become a universal nightly expectation. You hear someone breathe beside you. Slow in, slow out. The sound feels loud in darkness. Straw whispers under shifting weight. A child sighs from the other side, then presses closer to the warmest body. Someone's foot touches your ankle and is withdrawn. Because even medieval tolerance has limits. The blanket lifts slightly and cold slips inside. Everyone silently disapproves. It is corrected quickly. A small but telling detail appears in medieval hospitality and travel. Inns, hostels, monasteries, and private homes could place strangers in shared sleeping arrangements. Travellers might sleep in halls, lofts, barns, or beds already occupied by others. This sounds alarming to modern ears, and sometimes it was. Yet it also reflected practical limits. A bed was a resource, not a personal kingdom with decorative pillows and opinions. The warmth of shared sleep comes with complications. There are elbows, there are smells, There is snoring, coughing, muttering, and the mysterious human talent for becoming diagonal while unconscious. Blankets are tugged, straw shifts, someone too warm pushes away the cover, someone too cold pulls it back with quiet determination. Entire family negotiations happen without a single legal document. You can smell wool, skin, smoke, and stale linen. The air under the covering grows warmer and heavier. Breath collects near faces. The cap on your head traps heat, while the cloak over your legs holds down the lower bedding. The person beside you is warm along one side, cool where fabric gaps open. You understand the method now. The bed is not simply a place, it is a small climate made by people. Not everyone shared equally. Rank still mattered. The householder and spouse might have the best bed. Children might sleep together. Servants might sleep on pallets, benches, truckle beds, or in outbuildings. In larger houses, beds could be assigned by status, age, gender, task, or availability. Medieval society carried hierarchy into sleep, because hierarchy apparently needed no rest. Some specialists treat bed-sharing evidence with care, because documents often mention beds as property without describing exact nightly use. Inventories, court records, literature, household ordinances, and moral writings provide glimpses. Archaeology gives buildings and spaces, but not always sleeping bodies. Still, the pattern of shared rooms and multi-purpose spaces is difficult to miss. You feel the multi-purpose nature of the room around you. By day, this space held cooking, mending, eating, tools, smoke, children, and perhaps trade work. By night, it becomes a dormitory. The same bench that held a bowl might support a sleeper. A cloak worn outside becomes a coverlet. A chest becomes a boundary. A stool is moved so nobody kicks it in darkness, unless fate insists. The fire is lower now. The hearth no longer throws strong heat across the room. Its embers glow softly beneath ash, like red eyes half closed. As the fire's warmth fades, shared body heat becomes more important. The bed warms from within. Your own breath, the person beside you, and the trapped air under the blankets begin to replace the flames. Only partly, of course. Cold still finds ways to remind you of its education. It touches your nose. It lingers around exposed wrists. It creeps near the bed's edge, where blankets are thinner and feet feel abandoned by civilization. Someone curls inward. Someone else turns onto their side, creating a brief cave of warmth between bodies. It is not elegant, but it works. Children may sleep between adults, especially when cold or illness threatens. An infant might be kept close for nursing and warmth, though this carried risks that medieval people understood imperfectly and worried about in their own ways. Elders might be given better coverings if the household could manage it. Everyone knew that some bodies lost heat faster or suffered cold more sharply. You listen to the night's human sounds. A sleeper swallows. Someone whispers a prayer. Another person scratches beneath a sleeve because wool, straw, and winter skin do have their little rebellions. The child's breathing becomes deeper. Beyond the partition, the cow exhales through its nose. Above, the thatch stirs softly. The whole household feels like one creature. Gathered around embers and straw, there is comfort in that. There is irritation too. A shared bed can warm you, but it can also trap every movement. You cannot stretch freely. You cannot turn dramatically without becoming the villain of the blanket. If someone brings damp clothing into bed, everyone learns about it. If someone ate onions with confidence, the night remembers. Medieval realism is not always gentle, but it is very awake. Still, when the temperature sinks below freezing, closeness becomes mercy. The body beside you keeps one side warm. The blanket held by several bodies loses fewer edges to the air. A child tucked between sleepers survives better than one left alone near the wall. Servants sleeping together near a hall hearth might complain, but they also benefit from shared warmth. Community begins at the scale of breath. Earlier, you saw walls bargaining with winter, clothing trapping warmth, the hearth feeding the room, supper warm in the belly, and bedding holding heat. Now shared sleep connects all those strategies. People become part of the insulation. Not metaphorically only, literally. Their bodies reduce heat loss, warm the air, and keep the smallest sleepers protected. The room darkens further as the embers sink. Nobody says that they are surviving, they're only sleeping or trying to, yet survival often hides inside ordinary actions. Pulling a child closer, sharing a blanket, leaving a place near the fire for an elder, letting a traveller sleep in the hall, keeping bodies together when the walls cannot do enough. You lie still and let the crowded warmth gather. The smell is smoky and human. The straw beneath you makes tiny sounds when anyone moves. The cold waits at the edges of the bedding, patient and thin, but under wool, beside another breathing body. You feel the night lose a little of its sharpness. The household has become its own shelter. Not perfect, not peaceful in every detail, but warm enough, perhaps, to carry everyone toward the dark middle hours, when frost grows hardest and dreams come slowly. The crowded bedding holds its small warmth, but not every medieval sleeper has even that fragile advantage. As the night deepens, you sense the village beyond this room, where other fires burn lower, other blankets lie thinner, and other bodies wait more anxiously for morning. To understand survival below freezing, you must also step toward the poorer edge of winter, where every comfort has already been counted twice. You leave the warmer bed in your imagination and move through the dark lane. The snow underfoot has hardened with a faint crust. It breaks softly beneath each step, then squeaks where the cold has sharpened it. Smoke slips from roofs in uneven threads. Some houses glow faintly at their shutters. Others sit darker, with only a weak ember inside or no visible fire at all. Poverty is quiet at night. That does not mean it is sleeping. You come to a smaller shelter near the edge of the village. Its walls are patched with mixed materials, whatever could be gathered, borrowed, repaired, or not noticed too closely by someone with rights over the wood. The roof sags slightly under old thatch. Wind passes through it with a dry whisper. The door does close, but not with confidence. A bundle of rags lies at the threshold, doing the work of a soldier with very little pay. One hard truth of medieval poverty is that warmth required resources before night ever began. Fuel, food, dry clothing, sound shelter, decent bedding, and stored provisions all cost labour or money. A poor household could understand winter perfectly and still lack the means to fight it well. Knowledge helps. A woodpile helps more. Inside, the air is colder than in the first cottage. There is smoke, but less heat. The hearth contains a small fire fed by twigs, scraps, and perhaps peat if the region allows it. The flame looks nervous. It licks at damp fuel, flares, falters, then catches again. The smell is sharper here, with more smoke than warmth, and a sour dampness rising from the floor. You kneel near the hearth. Your hands feel heat only when held close, moving them back a little, and the cold returns at once. The room has fewer textiles to soften drafts. The bedding is lower, the straw is older. A single blanket covers more than it should, which is also a summary of many hard lives. Someone has laid a cloak over a child, then tucked their own arms beneath their body. A lesser-known habit appears in the desperate use of scraps. Old clothing, sacks, worn cloaks, animal hides, rags, loose straw, and even folded mats could become bedding. Nothing that could trap air was useless. A sleeve too torn to wear might warm a foot. A sack that once held grain might become a layer against the floor. Poverty is inventive because it has no choice. You hear the difference in this room. There is less talking. Hunger makes people quiet, especially after dark. A thin meal has already been eaten. Perhaps bread softened in hot water, A little gruel, some cabbage, a few beans, or nothing warm enough to remember kindly. The stomach complains, then settles into a dull ache. Without enough food, the body struggles to keep itself warm. Cold and hunger are old partners, and neither is charming. The smallest child coughs. The sound is dry, then wet at the edges. Someone lifts their head and listens. No one has the luxury of ignoring illness in winter. A chill can turn quickly. Damp bedding can deepen weakness. Smoke can trouble lungs. Cold feet can keep a person awake for hours. The poor survive not through one clever trick, but by enduring discomfort that wealth might soften before it becomes dangerous. The surviving evidence is uneven when we try to measure the poorest nights. Officials recorded taxes, rents, fines, charity, deaths, and disputes more often than ordinary suffering. Archaeology finds small dwellings, hearths, wear patterns, and food remains, but the full feeling of a hungry person shivering under thin wool rarely enters the record. History sometimes hears the powerful clearly and the cold poor only in fragments. Still, fragments are enough to guide you. You see a woman rubbing a child's feet between her hands. The skin is cold, perhaps damp from worn shoes. She works slowly, with care, breathing warmth into the small toes. The child does not cry now. They are too tired. Nearby, an older man sits wrapped in a cloak, not lying down yet because he fears he will grow colder once still. Movement produces heat, but sleep requires stillness. That is one of winter's quiet cruelties. A poor person may stamp feet, rub hands, or sit near flame to warm up, but exhaustion eventually demands rest. Once lying down, the body cools unless bedding. Food and companions hold the heat. If those fail, night becomes a long series of awakenings. Curls, shivers, and small adjustments. You notice the floor. It is hard-packed earth, with straw in places and bare cold in others. Damp rises from it. The smell is mineral, sour, and heavy. A mat or pallet makes a difference, but not enough. The body senses the chill below as surely as the draft above. The poor are often attacked by winter from every direction. A tiny sound comes from the wall. It may be a mouse in the thatch, or dry daub cracking with frost. No one moves. Even fear is tired here. The fire dims, and someone pushes the remaining fuel inward. There is no debate about adding a large log, because no large log waits nearby. The choice is not between comfort and thrift. It is between a little flame now, and perhaps none before dawn. Some households relied on charity during hard seasons. Neighbours, kin, parish help, monasteries, lords, guilds, or local customs might provide food, fuel, shelter, or alms in different places. Charity could be life-saving, but it was uncertain and often tied to status, reputation, and community judgment. Being poor did not make need simple. It often made need public. You feel the humiliation hidden inside the cold. To ask for fuel is to admit the house cannot manage. To borrow grain is to owe more than grain. To sleep in another person's hall is to become visible. Yet visibility may save a life. Medieval communities could be harsh, but they were also networks of obligation. Survival often depended on who noticed your smoke had stopped. Inside this poor shelter, noticing becomes everything. The mother notices the child's feet. The old man notices the failing flame. A neighbour, perhaps tomorrow, may notice no one has stepped outside in a world without modern emergency services. Attention itself can become a winter tool. It is imperfect, human, and sometimes too late, but often it is what exists. The child is moved closer to the older body. The blanket is shifted to cover both. The fire gives a last soft crackle. Smoke crawls upward through the room, bitter and thin. Your eyes sting. Your fingers ache even under wool. The cold here is not picturesque. It is patient, practical, and very good at finding weakness. Yet the household still works against it. They share heat. They tuck cloth. They guard the ember. They curl toward one another beneath worn coverings. They keep heads covered. They endure hunger quietly because complaining burns no fuel. This is not a romantic endurance, but it is endurance all the same. Beyond the walls, frost spreads over the lane and fields. In the first cottage, the hearth had a stronger glow. Animals breathed near the partition, and bedding held warmth more kindly. Here, the margin is thinner. Morning feels farther away. Still, the people in this small shelter continue the same ancient work. They try to carry body heat through darkness. You step back gently, leaving them to their crowded, fragile sleep. The night below freezing has not changed its nature. It presses equally against rich and poor walls, but it does not meet equal defences. For the poor, survival is a closer bargain, made with scraps, breath, hunger, neighbours, and the stubborn refusal to let the cold have the last word before dawn. From the poor cottage at the village edge, the night carries you toward a different kind of shelter. The road rises gently, pale under frost, and ahead you see the dark shape of a monastery. Its walls stand heavier than village daub, and its roofs gather moonlight along cold ridges. Here, survival below freezing is shaped not by family chatter, but by rule, bells, prayer, woolstone, and discipline. You pass through the outer gate in imagination. The air smells different at once, less like crowded bedding, more like damp stone. Old wood, candle wax, wool habits, and faint kitchen smoke. The silence is deeper, though not empty. Somewhere water drips in a cloister walk. A door closes softly. Sandaled or shod feet move across stone with careful restraint. Even cold seems quieter here, as if it has been told to behave during sacred hours. It does not obey completely. A firmly documented feature of monastic life is the ordered daily schedule. Medieval monks, nuns, and religious communities followed rules shaped by prayer, work, meals, silence, and rest. The exact routine varied by order, place, gender, season, and reform movement. Yet the night was rarely a simple stretch of uninterrupted sleep. Bells could wake the community for prayer while the frost still held the ground. You enter after Compline, the final office before night rest. The chapel has grown dim. Breath hangs faintly in the air near the choir stalls. Candles burn with small, steady flames, their wax scent blending with damp stone. Voices have recently chanted here, low and measured, rising and falling like warm breath against winter darkness. Now the sound fades into memory. The community moves away quietly, because silence after prayer is part of the night's discipline. You follow them towards the dormitory. Stone passages hold the cold with impressive devotion. Your fingertips brush a wall, and the chill answers immediately. The floor beneath your feet feels hard through your soles. In wealthier monasteries, buildings may be strong, well-built, and carefully maintained, but stone does not become kind simply because it is holy. It keeps winter close, which is very pious of it, and not especially helpful. A strange but practical detail hides in the clothing. Monastic habits, cowls, scapulars, tunics, mantles, and woolen layers could protect the body, especially when worn heavily in winter. Religious clothing was not designed as modern sleepwear, but it often remained part of nighttime warmth. Rules sometimes specified garments, bedding, or seasonal allowances. Spiritual humility still needed functioning toes. The dormitory is long and shadowed. Beds or pallets line the space depending on the house and its wealth. Some communities sleep communally in a dormitory, while leaders or sick members may have different arrangements. Straw bedding, blankets, rugs, coverlets, and woolen garments are arranged with plain care. The smell is wool, rushes, wax smoke, cold timber, and the faint sourness of many bodies trying to rest in an unheated building. You hear the quiet rustle of habits. No one settles with the loose freedom of a family cottage. Movements are controlled. A cough is softened into cloth. A whispered prayer slips into the darkness. A monk pulls his cowl closer around his head. Another tucks the edge of a blanket beneath his shoulder. A novice moves too loudly and probably receives a look, which is one of history's most durable teaching tools. The record does not let us describe every monastery neatly. Some were wealthy centres with stone buildings, extensive lands, good stores, and better bedding. Others were poor, remote, or struggling. Archaeology, customaries, rules, visitation records, and household accounts give clues. But each community faced winter differently. A Benedictine abbey, a Cistercian house, and a small priory did not all freeze in the same way. Still, certain patterns stand out. Communal sleeping created oversight and warmth. It also reduced privacy. Bedding was regulated. Excess luxury could be criticised. Though allowances were made for age, sickness, climate, and rank, a person might sleep clothed, belted, or partly ready to rise for night prayer. Monastic rest was not meant to indulge the body. It was meant to preserve enough strength for obedience. This is noble. It is also cold. You lie down on a plain bed or pallet and feel the familiar shock. The bedding is not fully warmed. The wool scratches at your neck. The room's cold air touches your nose and cheeks. Around you, other bodies settle under blankets, creating a faint shared warmth in the dormitory. Though not the close heap of a poor cottage, order remains, even when frost is rude. Outside, the cloister holds moonlight. Its open walkways are beautiful and bitter. Snow lies in the garth, blue under the night sky. The covered paths protect from falling snow or rain, but they do not keep out cold air. When monks or nuns cross for prayers in winter, the air bites through fabric. The sound of steps on stone becomes sharper at night, each footfall small and lonely. Then the bell comes. Not yet, perhaps, but it waits in the hours ahead. Night prayer might call the community from bedding before dawn. Sometimes in the coldest part of the night, you imagine waking from shallow warmth, leaving the bed's fragile pocket, and stepping into air that grips the lungs. The body protests. The rule replies. The bell has no sympathy. An overlooked winter habit appears in the way monastic spaces managed heat selectively. Kitchens, infirmaries, warming rooms, and certain workspaces might receive more fire than dormitories. The calefactory or warming room in some monasteries offered a place where members could warm themselves at permitted times. It was not a cosy lounge for endless complaining, though privately. One suspects some complaining occurred. The infirmary matters especially. Sick or elderly members could be treated with greater warmth, better food, and softer bedding. Medieval religious houses often recognized that bodies differed in strength. The rule might value austerity, but total neglect helped no one. A community needed its members alive enough to pray, work, copy texts, sing offices, tend gardens, and manage estates. Holiness did not eliminate practical administration. You smell kitchen smoke drifting faintly from another range of buildings, even after nightfall. Embers may be guarded. Bread ovens, brewing areas, kitchens, and bakehouses formed another layer of survival. Monasteries stored grain, ale, herbs, dried legumes, fish, cheese, and fuel. Depending on wealth and location, their winter security could be stronger than that of many villagers, though bad harvests still troubled them. The monastery also sheltered travellers. A guest house might receive pilgrims, messengers, nobles, poor wayfarers, or merchants seeking warmth and safety. Hospitality was a religious duty, shaped by rules and resources. A traveller arriving frozen could find food, bedding, and shelter, though conditions varied. In a freezing world, a monastery gate could mean the difference between endurance and danger. You return to the dormitory's darkness. The sleepers are not fully relaxed. Some lie still from discipline, others shift under wool. A cough moves down the room, then fades. The air is cold enough to sharpen every sound. You hear the faint crack of timber, the murmur of someone praying in sleep, the far movement of wind against roof tiles. The atmosphere is solemn, smoky, and deeply tired. Here, survival is not only household habit, it is institutional memory. The monastery survives winter through stored food, managed fuel, scheduled warmth, communal sleeping, thick clothing, sheltering walls, and rules that decide when bodies may rest or rise. These practices are not soft, but they are organized. Organization itself becomes a kind of blanket. You pull the wool closer and let the cold stone room settle around you. Earlier, poor households relied on scraps and shared breath. Here, the community relies on rhythm and obedience. Yet the body remains the body. It wants heat, it wants sleep, it wants not to cross the cloister before dawn. The bell waits in the dark, the embers wait under ash, the monks or nuns breathe beneath wool. Held between devotion and winter, and somewhere beyond the wall, frost continues its quiet work, unable to read the rule, but perfectly willing to test it. The monastery fades behind you, and the night carries you towards stone again. But this time the stone rises with pride. A castle stands on higher ground, its walls dark against the winter sky. From a distance it looks powerful enough to command the weather. Towers lift above the frost. A gatehouse watches the road. Moonlight touches battlements. And for one hopeful moment you might imagine warmth inside. That hope needs supervision. You pass beneath the gate and hear your steps change. The sound becomes harder, echoing off stone and timber, where a horse stamps in a stable, where metal rings against metal as a guard shifts position. The air smells of cold masonry, wet leather, smoke of straw, old rushes, and the faint sourness of many bodies gathered within thick walls. Castles were strong shelters, certainly. They were not always gentle homes. A solid piece of medieval reality is that castles served many purposes at once. They were military sites, administrative centres, lordly residences, storage places, symbols of authority, and workplaces for many people. Their buildings varied widely, from wooden fortifications to vast stone complexes. Some held comfortable chambers, but defensive strength did not automatically create domestic warmth. Stone can stop arrows and still make your fingers miserable. You entered Cercle-Tur, the great hall. It is larger than the cottage, larger than the monastic dormitory, and much grander than both. Yet the cold feels spread out here, not absent. The hearth burns in the hall, or perhaps a fireplace glows against one wall in a later arrangement. Smoke climbs upward into shadowed rafters. The flame looks impressive, but the hall is a hungry space. It swallows heat with noble indifference. Your breath touches the air and vanishes. Benches stand near trestle tables. Rushes cover parts of the floor, mixed with herbs if the household is attentive. Dogs lie where warmth collects. Having solved the seating problem better than everyone else, servants move with quiet purpose, carrying cups, trenchers, candles, and folded cloth. The hall smells of roasted meat, spilled ale, smoke, wet wool, and stone that has never apologized. A detail hidden in household records is the constant movement of goods through noble residences. Bedding, hangings, tableware, clothing, fuel, food stores, armour, and servants often travelled with a lordly household. Comfort was portable because residence itself could be mobile. A castle might look fixed, but noble domestic life involved trunks, carts, inventories, and people carrying heavy things while pretending not to resent history. Wall hangings matter here. In private chambers, tapestries and thick textiles soften the cold bite of stone. They block drafts, decorate walls, display wealth, and create a more human surface between body and masonry. In the hall, banners and hangings may add colour, but vast spaces remain difficult to warm. The higher the roof, the more heat wanders upward. Apparently seeking a career in the rafters, you move closer to the fire. The heat reaches your face and hands, but your back cools quickly. This old pattern returns, grander but familiar. Front warm, back cold. Dignity negotiating terms. A servant kneels to adjust logs, sparks jump, and the dogs open one eye with professional caution. The fire crackles loudly in the open hall, competing with footsteps, low voices, and wind pressing against shutters. Even castles had vulnerable openings. Windows might be narrow, shuttered, glazed in wealthier settings, or covered with horn, cloth, or wooden panels. Arrow slits and wall passages were excellent for defence and terrible for optimism. Doors could be heavy, but drafts loved thresholds. Staircases wound through stone towers, carrying cold air. Like a serum message from one level to another. The evidence becomes complicated when asking how warm elite rooms actually were. Inventories describe beds, curtains, cushions, and hangings. Building remains show fireplaces, chambers, halls, and service spaces, but comfort depended on weather, fuel supply, household size, architecture, and the lord's wealth. A royal chamber and a remote border tower were not living the same winter. You climb toward a private chamber. The stair is narrow and cold. Your hand touches the wall and regrets it. At the top, the chamber is smaller than the hall, which already improves the bargain. A fireplace glows near one side, shutters are closed. Hangings line parts of the wall. A bed stands with curtains ready to draw. Candles make small amber pools on a chest and table. It is not modern warmth, but it feels more defended. This is where wealth speaks softly. A bed with curtains creates a chamber within a chamber. Thick blankets and feather bedding trap heat. Fur-lined robes or mantles may rest nearby. A brazier might warm a space, though it must be used carefully because fumes and fire were serious hazards. Servants may warm bedding before the lord or lady enters. Luxury does not remove winter, but it hires many people to argue with it. You notice the floor. It may be covered with rushes, mats, carpets, or boards, depending on status and place. These do not make the room truly warm, but they soften the contact between feet and cold surfaces. A person stepping from bed onto bare stone understands regret immediately. A mat is not a miracle, it is a civilized apology. Below, in less privileged spaces, servants sleep differently. Some lie in the hall after tables are cleared. Others sleep in chambers, lofts, kitchens, stables, guardrooms, or near work areas. Their warmth depends on proximity to fires, available blankets, workload, rank, and luck. The castle contains many climates at once. The lord's curtained bed and the watchman's windy post belong to the same fortress, but not the same night. A guard on the wall feels the truth most sharply. You imagine stepping onto the battlements. The wind arrives without manners. It cuts through wool, finds the neck, and hardens breath in the throat. The stones underfoot are slick with frost. Leather straps stiffen. Metal fittings bite cold into fingers. A watchman may wear a cloak, hood, gloves, and padded garments, but still long for the hall fire with a tenderness normally reserved for saints. His duty cannot sleep. Castles needed watches, especially in troubled regions or during uncertain times. Gates, walls, stables, stores, and prisoners, if present, required attention. Night below freezing made guard duty miserable, but danger did not schedule itself for mild weather. The watchman stamps his feet, flexes fingers, and listens to the dark. The cold makes every sound seem sharper. Inside, the kitchen range may be one of the warmest places. Fires burn for cooking, baking, boiling, and roasting. Servants there work in heat, smoke, steam, grease, and constant motion. Warmth comes with labour. A cook might be warmer than a lord for part of the evening, though not necessarily happier. Medieval comfort is full of these little inversions. You return to the chamber, where the bed curtains are drawn. The sound changes once you are inside them. The room becomes muffled, enclosed, and softer. The smell is linen, wool, feathers, smoke, and perhaps lavender or dried herbs if someone has made the effort. The cold remains outside the curtains more than before. Your body warms the small space slowly, helped by bedding thick enough to hold the night at a respectful distance. This is privilege made physical, yet even here, winter has not disappeared. The first touch of sheets can still be cold, the fire can sink low, the chimney can smoke, a draught can slip along the floor. Stone walls can return their chill before dawn. Wealth improves survival by multiplying layers. Servants, fuel, textiles and rooms. It does not change the season into spring. So the castle teaches a quieter lesson. Strong walls protect against enemies, but warmth requires another kind of defence. Tapestries, shutters, hearths, curtains, bedding, servants, stored wood, crowded halls, guarded embers, and disciplined routines all matter. The fortress survives freezing nights not through grandeur alone, but through constant domestic management hidden behind its impressive silhouette. Outside, frost silvering the battlements makes the castle look almost peaceful. Inside, fires burn in selected rooms, dogs sleep near the hall, guards stamp under the stars, and servants carry warmth where rank demands it. You lie behind curtains in the dim chamber, hearing wind move through stone passages. The castle is powerful, draughty, smoky organised, and cold in different degrees. Winter has entered even here. The castle's stone chambers fade behind you, and the road returns beneath your feet. It is late now, and the world beyond walls feels wider, darker, and far less forgiving. A freezing night is difficult inside a cottage, monastery or castle, on the road. It becomes a question with teeth. Where will you sleep before the cold decides for you? You walk between hedges silvered with frost. The lane is hard underfoot, ridged by cartwheels and hoof marks. Frozen mud remembers every traveller who passed earlier. Your shoes strike the ground with small, dull sounds. The wind moves along the path, carrying the smell of the leafless branches. Distant smoke, horse sweat, and snow held somewhere in the clouds. Every sound travels farther at night. Every shadow appears to be considering a career in robbery. Travel in medieval winter was not a casual pleasure. People still moved. Of course, merchants and pilgrims, messengers, labourers, clergy, soldiers, servants, peddlers, and peasants all had reasons to cross cold distances. Roads did not close politely because life was inconvenient. Markets continued. Duties remained. Letters had to travel. Hunger and work pushed people outward. Even when sensible toes voted against it, you pull your cloak tighter. The cloth flaps once in the wind, then settles against your side. Your hood shields your ears, but your face is exposed. Breath clouds before you. The cold touches your teeth when you breathe through your mouth. You begin to understand why finding shelter before dark mattered so much. A traveller who delayed too long might face hours in the open, and the open has very poor hospitality. The first hope is an inn, if one exists nearby, in towns, on busy routes, and near markets. Inns or taverns could offer food, drink, stabling, and sleeping space. They were not uniform modern hotels. Some were crowded, smoky, noisy, expensive, and full of strangers with questionable socks, yet compared with freezing hedgerows. A smoky bench near a hearth could feel like divine architecture. Comfort is very relative after sun. You imagine entering one. The door opens, and warm air pushes outward with the smell of ale, wet wool, horses, stew, smoke, and human fatigue. Voices turn briefly toward you. Boots scrape the floor. A dog lifts its head and decides you are not worth standing for. The host or servant judges your money, your manners, your horse if you have one, and your likelihood of causing trouble before morning. A revealing detail from medieval travel culture is that sleeping arrangements could be shared and improvised. Travellers might sleep in common rooms, on benches, in lofts, or in beds with others. Privacy cost money, and sometimes no amount of money produced much of it. A place near the fire might be precious. A dry corner might be victory. A blanket might be rented, borrowed, or jealously guarded. You sit by the inn fire and feel your fingers return slowly. The pain is sharp at first, then dull and pulsing. Wet hems steam near the hearth. Someone laughs too loudly. Someone else coughs into a sleeve. A bowl of hot food appears, thinner than you hoped, warmer than you feared. The room is not peaceful, but it is enclosed. The walls are imperfect, but they are walls. That distinction becomes profound in winter. Not every traveller can afford an inn, so the road offers other possibilities, each with its own uncertainty. A monastery guest house may receive you, especially if you are a pilgrim. Cleric, messenger, or desperate soul at the gate, a parish church might provide limited shelter. A barn, hayloft, stable, or shed might become a bed for the night. A peasant household might offer space, though hospitality depends on custom, resources, fear and reputation. You approach a farmstead next. Smoke rises from its roof, thin and pale under the moon. The yard is rutted and frozen. A cart stands under a lean-to, its wheels rimmed with frost. You knock. The sound feels too loud in the cold. For a long moment nothing happens. Then a shutter shifts, and a voice asks who is there. Medieval hospitality may be real, but so is suspicion. Bandits also get chilly. Unfortunately, if admitted, you may not enter the family bed space. You may be placed near the hearth, on straw in a corner, in the byre, or in the barn. A bowl might be offered, a cup might be shared. News may be requested before kindness is fully granted. Travellers carry information as surely as they carry packs. In a world of slow communication, gossip has excellent circulation. A small travel habit worth noticing is the use of hay as emergency bedding. A hayloft could provide insulation from the ground and trap warmth around the body. It could also itch, smell strongly, hide mice, and make breathing unpleasant for some. Still, if the alternative is open frost, hay becomes extremely persuasive. You do not ask hay for perfection, you ask it for survival. You climb into such a loft. The ladder is rough under your hands. Above, the hay smells sweet, dusty, and animal warm. Below, livestock shift in the darkness, breathing damp heat upward. You burrow into the hay carefully, keeping your cloak wrapped tight and your hood over your head. The stems poke through fabric. Dust catches your throat. Somewhere close, a mouse expresses an opinion and retreats. It is not luxury. It is shelter. The hay traps air around your body. Much like straw bedding in a cottage, your cloak becomes a blanket. Your pack becomes a pillow, unless it contains something hard, which of course it does. You keep your shoes near you, because losing shoes in a strange barn would make morning deeply educational. The animals below add warmth, smell, and soft, restless sounds. The record becomes uncertain when we ask how often winter travellers relied on barns, churches, or open shelters. Legal records, travel accounts, miracle stories, estate documents, and literature show people moving and seeking lodging, but rarely map every cold night. Many arrangements were local, informal, and temporary. They happened because someone knocked, someone answered, and the weather left few alternatives. Out on the road, danger remains. Freezing is not the only threat. Exhaustion, wet clothing, hunger, darkness, wolves in some regions, thieves, injury, and losing the path all matter. A shallow ditch under snow can twist an ankle. A stream crossing can soak the legs. A wrong turn can steal an hour of daylight. Medieval travel was often measured not just in miles, but in chances to find warmth before night. You remember the earlier lessons. Fuel must be gathered before dark, clothing must stay dry, food must warm the body, bedding must hold heat. Companions matter. These rules follow the traveller too, but with less control. You carry what you can. A cloak, spare wrappings, bread, cheese, a knife, flint or tinder if fortunate. Perhaps a staff. Every object has weight. Every useful object must justify that weight with survival. A pilgrim beside you in the hay whispers a prayer. Another traveller mutters about the road. The cold, the host, the price of ale, and possibly the moral decline of bridges. Complaining is not warmth, but it passes time. Beneath a loft, a horse exhales heavily. The barn walls creak in the wind. Frost forms outside on the door latch. Your body begins warming the small hollow you made in the hay. Sleep comes unevenly. You wake when the horse shifts. You wake when your foot slips from under the cloak. You wake when cold touches your nose. Then you burrow deeper. Tuck fabric under your shoulder and listen for any human sound that suggests danger. The road has taught you to sleep lightly. A traveller's rest is half recovery and half watchfulness, yet even this rough shelter can save you. A barn keeps off snow, hay lifts you from frozen ground, animals warm the air, a borrowed bowl fills the stomach, a door blocks the worst wind. None of it is guaranteed, and none of it is perfectly comfortable. But comfort is not the measure tonight. Morning is the measure. So you lie in the hayloft, wrapped in wool and travel dust, while the freezing night hardens around the farmstead, somewhere far behind. The castle fires sink low, somewhere else. A monastery bell waits in darkness, here, on the road's edge. Survival depends on reaching shelter before strength runs out. You close your eyes and let the dusty warmth gather slowly around you. Hopeful for hay, hooves, walls, and one more borrowed corner of the medieval world. The hayloft fades into the wider dark, and your thoughts return to the one thing every shelter still depends upon. Cottage, barn, monastery, castle, or roadside inn, each place has its own walls and customs, yet all of them fear the same small disaster before dawn. The fire may die completely, leaving only cold ash where morning warmth should begin, so now you watch the embers. They glow low in a bed of grey, red at the centre and black around the edges. The flame itself has almost disappeared. Only a few orange threads move beneath the ash, pulsing when air reaches them. The room smells quieter than before, less of cooking, more of char, soot, and tired wood. This is the hidden hour of fire, when brightness withdraws and usefulness becomes secret. Keeping embers alive was a plain necessity in many households. Starting fire from scratch required tinder, skill, dry materials, and patience. Flint and steel, fire strikers, tinder fungus, charred cloth, dry grasses, or carefully kept coals could help. But cold fingers and damp weather made everything harder. It was much easier to carry fire through the night than persuade it to be born again before breakfast. You kneel beside the hearth. Heat reaches your face only faintly now. The floor is cold under your knees. Someone uses a stick or iron tool to gather the remaining coals inward. Ash is drawn over them gently, not to smother them entirely, but to slow their burning. The motion is careful, almost tender. Fire can be fierce, but embers are delicate. They must be protected from both hunger and excess air. The ash falls with a soft sigh. A small red line disappears, then glows again through a thin crack. This looks simple, but it is experienced work. Too much ash, and the ember may suffocate. Too little, and it burns away before morning. Too much draught, and the coal spends itself like a fool at market. Too little care, and everyone wakes to cold darkness, which is a rude way to begin any century. One overlooked detail is how often fire moves socially. A neighbour might lend embers if another hearth went cold. In some communities, carrying live coals from house to house was practical and meaningful. Fire was not only an object, it was continuity. A shared coal could restart a morning, warm a child, cook a meal, and prevent a great deal of shivering resentment. You imagine the shame of needing one. At first light, someone might carry a pot, pan, or covered vessel to a neighbour's door. Their breath would cloud in the lane. They might ask quietly, hoping the request sounded ordinary. Perhaps it was ordinary in a village. Most people understood the risk. Hearths failed, wood ran damp, children knocked things over, ash deceived even careful hands, winter made everyone humble eventually. The written record does not always capture this exchange neatly. Household manuals, legal references, archaeology, folklore, and later rural customs offer hints about fire keeping. Yet the exact gestures of ordinary people remain partly hidden. We can see the tools, the hearths, and the need. We must imagine the whispered request at the door through the evidence that survives around it. Back by the hearth, the household prepares for sleep. The fire's bright heat is no longer meant to fill the room. Its task has changed. Now it must preserve a seed of warmth. A person checks the thatch opening, the draught, the placement of nearby wood, and anything that might catch fire. A medieval house is full of burnable things: straw, cloth, timber, baskets, rushes, and bedding all wait too close if foolishness enters. Fire saves lives. Fire also threatens them. That is the great contradiction beside every winter hearth. People need flames to cook, warm, dry, and light, yet an open fire can scorch clothing, burn bedding, smoke the room, or set a roof alight. Many medieval buildings were wonderfully flammable, as though constructed by someone with dramatic confidence. So banking embers required both hope and caution. A child is warned not to touch the hearthstones. The warning is unnecessary and necessary at the same time. Children know fire burns, but curiosity has survived many warnings. The older woman leans forward and studies the ash mound. Her face is lined by dim red light. She knows what tomorrow requires. Before bread, before pottage, before warm hands, the ember must remain. You feel the room cooling around you. Without open flame, the shadows become heavier. The walls return to their winter personality. The shutter seems louder. The animal partition breathes softly in the dark. The bedding waits, but no one wants to abandon the hearth too soon. Fire draws the eye even when small. It is difficult to trust sleep to something buried under ash. A final piece of wood is placed near the hearth. Not on it. This is for morning. Dry fuel must be ready before stiff fingers start fumbling. Twigs, shavings, straw twists, bark, or prepared tinder may be kept close but safe. A household that prepares tinder before sleeping gives itself a kinder dawn. Cold mornings reward forethought with suspicious enthusiasm. You smell the tinder bundle when it is moved. Dry grass, bark fibre, and a faint dusty scent rise briefly. Someone wraps it or places it in a protected nook. Damp is the enemy. A little moisture can turn fire, making into an extended lesson in disappointment. Medieval people did not need scientific vocabulary to understand this. They had mornings. The ember glows again when air slips through the ash. For a breath, it brightens, then it darkens. This slow pulsing feels almost alive, like the breathing cow behind the partition or the sleeping child under wool. The hearth has become another creature in the room, resting but not gone. Everyone depends on its small red heart. In monasteries, kitchen fires and bakehouse embers might be managed by assigned workers. In castles, servants guarded fires in halls, kitchens, and chambers. In inns, hosts watched the hearth because guests depended on it. And because burning down the inn was poor business among poor households, the same principle held with fewer resources. Someone had to remember the coals. The task could not be left entirely to chance. You think back over the night's shelters. The first cottage guarded dry wood. The poor household spared tiny fuel. The monastery arranged warmth by rule. The castle moved heat according to rank. The traveller depended on whatever fire another household allowed. Beneath every scene lay the same fragile continuity. Flame becoming ember, ember becoming flame again. The air grows colder near your hands. You tuck them into your sleeves, but keep watching. There is comfort in the red glow. It promises that morning may begin without the scrape of flint in darkness. It promises that the pot may warm again. It promises that damp shoes may face another day of drying, and that the room may fill once more with smoke, complaint, and life at last. The hearthkeeper leans back. The ash is mounded, the coals are covered, the wood is ready. The room exhales into darkness, nobody celebrates. This is ordinary success, which is often the most important kind. Medieval survival below freezing depends on such small victories, repeated until they become invisible. You rise from the hearth and return toward the bedding, behind you, under ash. The embers glow faintly, hidden but alive. Outside. Frost hardens along the door and hedges. Inside, the household trusts a red sleeping seed to carry warmth across the coldest hours. The embers are banked, but sleep has not fully arrived. Medieval households do not simply fall into bed because the fire is dimmed. Before the coldest hours take hold, there is still work to finish. Small tasks gather at the edge of night, each one plain, repetitive, and easy to overlook. Yet every task may decide how bitter the darkness becomes. You stand again in the cottage, listening. The room is quieter after supper, but not still. A stool scrapes softly across the floor. Wool rustles as someone bends near the hearth. The cow shifts behind the partition. A child is told to stay wrapped, which naturally makes the child move immediately. Outside, wind runs along the thatch with a dry, combing sound, searching for places where the house is weak. The first work is checking fuel. A man crouches near the stacked wood and separates pieces by size. Dry twigs go close enough for morning use, but not close enough to invite disaster. A few thicker sticks remain farther back, saved for need. Damp pieces are turned so they may dry slowly in the hearth's fading warmth. This is not dramatic labour. It is the arithmetic of heat. Estate accounts and household ordinances often show how seriously fuel was managed. Wood, charcoal, peat, brushwood, and other fuels could be gathered, purchased, rationed, stored, or assigned by right. In many places, access to woodland was controlled. A cold night was therefore not only a matter of weather, it was also a matter of law, custom, labour, and rank. You smell the woodpile as it's moved. Dry wood smells sweet and dusty. Damp wood smells sour, green, and reluctant. If burned too soon, it smokes heavily and warms badly. Everyone in the room seems to know this without discussion. Winter households carry such knowledge in their hands. They do not need to lecture the wood, they simply distrust it accurately. Next comes the door. Someone presses a shoulder against it while another checks the bar. The latch gives a dull wooden sound, cloth is pushed again into the gap at the lower edge, and a twist of straw is placed where the wind enters boldly. The cold line weakens near your ankles, though it does not vanish. Drafts are like gossip. Even when blocked, they find another route. A small practical custom appears in these nightly repairs. People used whatever flexible materials were near at hand to block cold. Rags, straw, moss, spare sacking, rushes, wooden scraps, and old clothing could all serve. None of it looks elegant. All of it matters. Medieval interior comfort often depended on humble objects doing quiet work in corners. The shutter is checked next. The wood is cold under the fingers. It rattles once when wind presses from outside. A peg is tightened. The room darkens further. Firelight is lowered. and now the interior feels held together by memory, habit, and the faint glow under ash. A thin smell of night air slips through the crack before the cloth plug is adjusted. You notice clothing near the hearth. Wet hems hang from pegs, hose, wraps, mittens, and shoes must be considered before sleep. If left damp, they may freeze or grow miserable by morning. If placed too close, they may scorch. The family arranges them with care, giving each object a place in the last warmth. Shoes especially are watched. Hard leather near heat can warp, shrink, stiffen or crack, and then tomorrow begins badly. Nobody wants that. A woman lifts a woolen garment and feels the sleeve. It is still damp near the cuff. She turns it inside out. Steam rises faintly, carrying the smell of sheep, smoke, and wet labour. The garment is placed on a peg where heat can touch it slowly. The movement is tired, but exact. A wet sleeve at dawn is not a tragedy, but it is an insult. The evidence becomes patchy when we try to follow every nightly chore in poor homes. Written records favour rents, disputes, purchases, and unusual events. They rarely pause to describe someone tucking straw into a draft. Yet building remains. Tools, textiles, and later rural habits point towards steady maintenance. Survival lived in gestures too ordinary for scribes to admire. Now animals need attention. Someone opens the partition and enters the buyer space, Deep calls. The warm smell grows thicker at once. Straw, dung, hay, hide, and breath fill the room. You hear the cow's weight shift, then a low, patient exhale. A hand checks the animal's flank, bedding, and tether. A little fodder is moved within reach. Frozen nights are not kind to livestock, and livestock are too valuable to neglect. The person pauses to listen. Animals can reveal trouble before humans see it. Restlessness may signal pain, hunger, cold, or fear. A loose tether can become danger. Damp bedding can chill the animal. Lack of fodder can weaken it. The household depends on these creatures for milk, wool, manure, labour, meat, and status. Caring for them before sleep protects tomorrow as much as tonight. The buyer closes again. The room returns to its usual mixture of smells, slightly stronger now. The child wrinkles their nose under the blanket. No one is impressed by the complaint. Medieval noses worked hard for a living. Fresh air had value, but so did a living cow, dry shoes, and a roof that did not leak. Priorities gather quickly in winter. A basket is moved near the wall. Inside are tools for mourning: a small knife, a wooden bowl, perhaps cord, tinder, or mending scraps. Things needed before sunrise must be reachable in darkness. Candles or rushlights may be too precious for careless use. The hand learns the room by touch. A misplaced tool can waste time when hands are stiff, and stiff hands make everything feel personal. Then comes mending. A strap is repaired by ember light. A torn edge of cloth is pinned or stitched roughly. A cord is retied. A loose shoe binding is checked. Clothing and tools fail at the worst moments because objects have a sense of theatre. Better to fix them now, while the fingers still move and some warmth remains in the room. The needle flashes once in the low glow. Thread pulls through fabric with a tiny whisper. Someone squints, someone else holds the cloth closer to the hearth, then pulls back when ash shifts. The work is slow. It cannot be perfect in such dimness. It only needs to be good enough to survive one more day, which is a very medieval standard and not a bad one. Water is checked too. A jug or bucket left in the wrong place may freeze near the door. If moved too close to the filth or animals, it becomes another problem. The household positions it with the same care given to fuel and clothing. Cold complicates everything, even water, the simplest thing in the world. Begins making demands. You feel fatigue settling over the room. The tasks are nearly finished. The door is barred. The shutter is steadier. Clothes hang where they may dry. Animals are checked. Fuel and tinder wait. Bedding is arranged, the embers sleep beneath ash. Nothing grand has happened, yet the room is safer than it was an hour ago. This is the hidden labour behind surviving freezing nights, not a single clever secret, but dozens of small acts done before exhaustion wins. Medieval people prepared because night punished carelessness. A loose shutter, wet stocking, empty tinder bundle, restless cow, or failed ember could become tomorrow's trouble before dawn even broke. At last, the household begins to sink toward rest. The older woman lowers herself carefully beneath wool. The child is tucked again, more firmly this time. The man rubs his hands, then blows once into his fingers. The smell of ash drifts low across the room, beyond the wall. Wind moves through the yard and over frozen tools, frozen paths, and frozen fields. You lie down again under the layered bedding. The straw answers with its dry murmur. Your feet search for warmth, and your hands disappear into your sleeves. Around you, the room is not comfortable exactly, but it is prepared. That preparation is a kind of peace. The last chore is listening. Everyone listens for the door, the animals, the wind, the fire, and the child's breath, then slowly. The household trusts its work. The cold remains outside and inside, but held back just enough by hands that knew what to do before sleep. The household has done its last work, and the room settles into the colder half of night. The door is barred. The clothes hang near fading warmth. The animals breathe behind their rough partition. Yet even with all this care, winter still enters the body in quieter ways. It reaches through damp sleeves, thin bedding, empty stomachs, and tired lungs. Medieval people knew cold not only as weather, but as illness waiting nearby. You lie still and listen to someone cough. The sound begins small, then catches in the chest. It fades into the blanket, but everyone hears it. In a crowded room, illness is never entirely private. Breath is shared. Smoke is shared. Bedding, cups, spoons, and worries are shared too. The fire may protect against freezing, but it also fills the air with irritation. Warmth and smoke arrive together. Like relatives who refuse separate invitations, people in the Middle Ages understood illness through ideas different from modern medicine. Learned physicians often explained the body through humours, qualities, seasons, diet, air, and balance. Cold and damp were thought to influence health, especially when they entered through poor clothing. Wet feet, night air, or bad conditions. Everyday people mix such ideas with experience. Household remedies, prayer, charms, and advice from elders. You can feel how convincing that world seems. The air is damp near the floor. Your nose is cold under the edge of the blanket. Your throat tastes faintly of ash. If you woke feverish after such a night, would you blame cold air, damp bedding, smoke, divine warning, spoiled food, or bad luck? Perhaps several. Medieval explanations often did not compete neatly. They gathered together like blankets on a bed. A child stirs beside the older woman. A hand reaches out and touches the child's forehead. The gesture is ancient. No text is needed. Warm skin worries the household. Cold hands worry it too. Someone draws the blanket higher, covering the child's neck. Another person mutters that the feet must stay warm. This advice may sound simple, but in a room below, freezing. Simple advice can be the only available medicine. A curious winter remedy might involve warmed drinks, herbs, honey if available, ale, broth, or spiced mixtures in wealthier homes. Some households use sage, thyme, horehound, hyssop, or other plants associated with coughs and chest troubles. Recipes varied widely, and not all were effective. Some were soothing mainly because they were warm, which is honestly not the worst achievement at midnight. The smell of herbs may linger near the hearth. A small bundle hangs from a beam, dry and brittle. When crushed, it gives off a sharp, green scent beneath the smoke. The household may not have a physician within reach. Many people relied on women's practical knowledge, local healers, monastic infirmaries, barber surgeons, priests, neighbours, or family memory. Care often began with what was close at hand. The record becomes difficult here, because elite medical texts speak more clearly than poor households. Manuscripts preserve learned theories, recipes, diagrams, and advice. Court records and miracle collections preserve moments of crisis. Archaeology reveals bones, teeth, living conditions, and sometimes traces of plants, but the ordinary cough in a cold cottage rarely writes its own account. Still, the pattern appears everywhere. Cold worsened hardship because it weakened bodies already under pressure. Hunger made people less resilient. Damp bedding chilled the skin, smoke irritated breathing, crowding spread infections. Hard work continued despite fever, because animals still needed fodder and grain still needed grinding. Medieval illness was not separate from daily survival. It lived inside the same room. You hear another cough from across the bedding. Someone whispers a prayer under their breath. The words are quiet, worn smooth by repetition. Saints might be invoked for illness, protection, childbirth, travel, or sudden danger, holy water, relics, blessed objects, pilgrimages, vows, and charms all belong to the world of healing. To modern ears, this may sound separate from practical care. To medieval people, body and soul lived under the same roof. That roof is still cold. The older man shifts and rubs his knees beneath the cloak. Aching joints become louder in winter, fingers stiffen. Old injuries remember themselves, tooth pain sharpens in cold air. Chapped skin splits, feet crack inside damp wrappings. None of this may become a grand medical event, but it shapes sleep, work, and mood. Winter is full of small bodily negotiations. A lesser seen detail is the role of the warming room in some institutions. Monasteries, hospitals, and larger houses might offer spaces where vulnerable people could warm themselves more safely. Infirmaries could provide better bedding, food, and heat than ordinary sleeping areas. This did not create modern hospitals, but it shows a practical recognition that weakness needed different treatment. In a village, care is more domestic. A sick child is kept closer to the warm body of an adult. An elder may receive an extra sheepskin. Someone may warm a cloth near the hearth and place it over the chest. A bowl of thin broth may be saved for dawn. The household cannot cure every illness, but it can reduce cold, provide liquid, share food, and watch through the night. Watching is its own medicine. You notice how the room listens to the sick. A cough changes the silence. A restless turn wakes another sleeper. A feverish murmur draws a hand from under wool. In a world without thermometers, attention becomes measurement. Skin, breath, sweat, colour, appetite, speech, and strength are read carefully. The body is a text everyone learns by worry. Cold also shaped beliefs about air. Bad air, night air, damp air, and corrupted smells could be feared. Smoke might be unpleasant, but some people believed certain scents, herbs, or fires could purify spaces. The line between sensory experience and medical theory was soft. If cold, damp, foul air made you feel worse, it was easy to believe the air itself carried danger. You breathe slowly beneath the blanket. The wool smells of smoke and skin. The darkness feels thick, close, and human. Outside, frost deepens without sound. Inside, illness is held back by warmth, food, prayers, coverings, and care. None of these defences is perfect. Some nights they fail. Medieval winter could take the weakest first, then leave the household to remember every sign they noticed too late. But tonight, the child settles. The cough quiets for a while. The older woman keeps one hand near the small shoulder. The embers under ash hold their secret red glow. The cow shifts softly, giving off damp warmth. The room returns to its slow pattern of sleeping breath. Though everyone remains a little more alert than before, you understand now that surviving freezing nights meant protecting health before illness fully arrived. Keep clothing dry, warm the feet, feed the body, avoid damp bedding. Watch the young and old, trust herbs when they help. Pray when fear grows larger than knowledge. Ask neighbours when need becomes too heavy. Rest if rest can be found. The Middle Ages did not lack intelligence about cold. It lacked many tools modern people take for granted. So care became layered, like clothing, bedding, and walls. Some layers were practical, some were spiritual, some were based on observation, some were mistaken, but still offered comfort in the dark. You lie still as the house breathes around you. The cough has faded, the wind has softened, the night remains below freezing. But the household has answered with warmth, touch, memory, remedies, and watchfulness. Medieval survival is never only keeping the body warm, it is keeping the body well enough to reach morning. The cough has softened, and the household sinks again into the long patience of night. Yet outside the walls, the weather is still speaking. Medieval people could not open a forecast, glance at a glowing map, or complain about a storm alert being wrong. They watched the sky, the wind, the moon, the animals, the trees, and the behaviour of frost. Survival often began with noticing. You listen from beneath the wool. The wind has changed slightly. Earlier it combed through the thatch with a dry whisper. Now it presses in small bursts against the shutter, pauses, then returns from a colder angle. The sound is different enough that an experienced villager might remember it. Weather knowledge was not abstract, it lived in the ears, skin, knees, smoke, and stored memory of people who had suffered through many winters. One dependable part of rural medieval life was close observation of seasons. Farmers, shepherds, travellers, fishers, and householders watched weather because work depended on it. Sowing, harvesting, grazing, fuel gathering, milling, travel, washing, brewing, slaughtering, and market visits all answered to sky and ground. A freezing night could damage stores, animals, roads, and bodies. So the village learned to read small signs. You imagine stepping outside before sleep. The air catches your face at once. It smells clean in a harsh way, like frozen earth, bare wood, distant smoke, and water locked into ice. The moon glows behind thin cloud. Frost has whitened the fence rails. Underfoot, the ground is no longer merely cold, it is stiff, sealed, and noisy. Each step gives a brittle crunch. Someone looks upward. Clouds moving fast may warn of wind. A clear sky may promise deeper frost, because the day's little warmth escapes into the dark. Smoke sinking low can suggest heavy damp air. A halo around the moon might be taken as a sign of coming change. These observations were not always precise, but they were useful enough to guide caution. Before instruments, attention was the instrument. There were also sayings. Weather lore travelled easily because it fit into memory. Saints' days, moon phases, animal behaviour, bird movement, plant signs, and odd sky colours all gathered meanings. Some sayings had practical roots, others were confident nonsense wearing a hat. Medieval people were very capable of both careful observation and cheerful superstition, which is a deeply human combination. A rooster calls too early somewhere nearby. Everyone quietly resents him. Animals often shaped weather judgment. Cattle crowding, sheep turning away from wind, birds feeding hard before storms, or dogs acting restless might be noticed. Were these signs always reliable? Not neatly. But in a world where livestock shared human survival, animal behaviour mattered. A shepherd who ignored the flock's discomfort might spend dawn discovering that sheep had made a better forecast than he had. The village does not sleep without memory. Older people remember previous winters. They remember the year the pond froze thick enough for carts. They remember the thaw that turned roads into traps, They remember snow that buried hedges, winds that stripped roofs, and sudden freezes that killed lambs. Weather knowledge gathers in stories, because stories are easier to carry than ledgers when your hands are full of firewood. The sources become slippery when we ask exactly how villagers predicted weather. Almanacs, agricultural treatises, calendars, sermons, poems, chronicles, and later folklore preserve fragments. But spoken warnings beside a hearth mostly vanished. We know people watched nature because their survival required it. Yet the exact village phrases are often lost. The frost kept no minutes. Inside the cottage, weather is judged by effects. A draught grows stronger at the door, the cow shifts more often. The ash over the embers cools faster near the open side of the hearth. A hanging garment stiffens slightly at its damp hem. Someone notices that the water jug near the wall feels too cold. These are not poetic omens. They are household data, collected by sleepy hands. You hear the older woman murmur. She says the night will be harder before dawn. No one argues. The statement has the calm authority of someone whose bones have negotiated with many January mornings. A younger man checks the door again. Though it was checked before, he presses the cloth deeper into the gap. The movement says that weather has changed enough to deserve another answer. Outside, frost thickens on thatch and hedges. The stars show briefly between clouds. If the sky clears completely, the cold may become sharper. Snow cover can brighten the night and soften sounds, but it can also hide hazards. Frozen ruts can break ankles. Ice on a path can turn a simple walk to the byre into an undignified medieval performance. Weather never had to be dramatic to be dangerous. A small detail from medieval calendars matters here. Many calendars connected months with seasonal labour, showing pruning, ploughing, harvesting, slaughtering, warming by the fire, or feasting. These images remind us that time was understood through work and weather. Winter was not just a date range, it was a set of tasks, restrictions, smells, foods, and bodily feelings. You return inside, grateful for the door. The room feels smoky and close after the outdoor air. Your cheeks sting as they warm. The bedding smells stronger now. Wool and straw and human sleep. The fire is still hidden under ash. You realize that the village survives by comparing inside and outside constantly. How much colder is the threshold? How much wind enters? How long before dawn? How hard will morning work be? Weather also shaped decisions made before the night began. If a severe freeze was expected, animals might be brought closer. Extra fuel might be gathered early. Water might be drawn before buckets froze. Travel might be delayed. More bedding might be arranged. Food might be cooked sooner. A household that read the sky well could reduce danger before darkness hardened. Sometimes, of course, the sky lied. A storm could arrive faster than expected. A thaw could freeze suddenly. A traveller could trust a mild afternoon and meet a brutal evening. Medieval people were not magical weather prophets. They were practiced observers living with uncertainty. Their wisdom lay not in always knowing, but in preparing when signs looked unfriendly. That is the quiet discipline you feel now. The household listens, it adjusts, it does not panic. A blanket is pulled higher around the child. The older man keeps his cap on. The woman moves the water jug away from the coldest wall. The man checks the animal partition once more, then returns without speaking. The room has become a small weather station made of skin, wood, wool, smoke, and habit, beyond the village. The same watching continues in different forms. Monks rise by bells but still notice frost in the cloister. Castle guards rid wind on walls and ice on steps. Travellers scan clouds before choosing a road. Shepherds judge where the flock should stay sheltered. Every life has its own forecast, made from need. You settle back under the bedding and hear the wind soften again. Perhaps the worst will pass, perhaps the cold will deepen. The household cannot know completely, it can only remain attentive. In medieval winter, attention is not a luxury, it is a survival tool, as real as a cloak, a shutter, or a guarded ember. The night outside is vast, but the village has been listening to it for generations. Wind, frost, moonlight, smoke, animals, cloud, and old memory all speak in small ways. You close your eyes as those signs gather around the sleeping room, and the household rests inside its fragile circle of knowledge. The weather has been watched, the door has been checked, and the bedding has tightened around sleeping bodies, yet not every body meets the cold with equal strength. In the dim room, you begin to notice who receives the most careful attention. A child tucked between adults, an elder given the warmer side, someone ill-placed closer to the protected centre. Medieval survival was never only about buildings and fire, it was also about deciding who needed warmth most. You hear a child breathe beneath the blanket. The sound is small, steady, and close. Their head is covered, but not so tightly that breath becomes trapped. A hand adjusts the wool at the neck. Another hand checks the feet, because cold toes seem to announce trouble before the rest of the body understands. Children lose warmth quickly, and adults knew this through experience, even without modern physiology. A clear pattern in medieval households is the age-shaped vulnerability. Infants, young children, elders, the sick, pregnant women, and exhausted labourers all faced winter differently. Food, bedding, shelter, and care were often distributed according to need, status, and available resources. A household might be poor, but it still made choices. The smallest body might receive the safest place. If love and circumstance allowed, the child shifts closer. A knee presses against your side. A small hand grips the edge of the blanket, then relaxes. The warmth of nearby adults forms a living wall around them. Earlier, shared sleep felt crowded and inconvenient. Now it appears as protection. A child placed alone near a draught would struggle more. Between two warm bodies, the night loses a little strength. Not all children were treated equally across time, class, or circumstance. Of course, medieval childhood could be tender, harsh, busy, playful, short or long, depending on luck. Yet surviving letters, miracle stories, wills, sermons, and household traces show that people worried over children deeply. They fed them, wrapped them, scolded them, prayed for them, and sometimes spoiled them in ways moralists disliked. Moralists disliked many things. That was their hobby. A small detail from winter care is the warming of small garments before morning. A child's shoes, wraps, hood, or mittens might be placed near safe heat, because dressing a half-awake child in cold damp cloth is an act of household cruelty. Nobody needs a philosopher to explain this. The child will explain it loudly across the bedding. An older person stirs. Their breath is rougher. Their joints move slowly beneath wool. Age changes the cold. It makes fingers stiff, sleep shallow, and old aches more talkative. An elder may need extra covering over knees and feet, or a place away from the door. If there is a sheepskin, heavier cloak, or better blanket, it may be placed where age suffers most. The evidence is not tidy when we trace care inside ordinary homes. Records often mention elders through inheritance, dependents, property, disputes, pensions, or charity. They do not usually describe a granddaughter pulling wool over cold knees. Yet the structure of households, the language of obligation, and the practical needs of age suggest many quiet acts. Some were loving, some were grudging. Many were necessary. You smell warmed wool as a blanket is shifted. It carries smoke, lanolin, and the faint sourness of long use. The older woman accepts it without ceremony. Her hand pats the edge once, perhaps in thanks, perhaps to make sure it stays where placed. She keeps her cap on. She has known enough winters to trust neither pride nor loose bedding. Wisdom often looks like covering your head before anyone asks. The sick are watched too. You remember the cough from earlier, now softened but not forgotten. A person with fever may feel hot and cold together, sweating under blankets while shivering inside. Person with weakness may not wake when the fire fades. Someone must notice. In a crowded room, every turn and breath becomes part of the household's listening. Sleep remains light when illness lies nearby. Care might include warmed cloths, broth, herbs, prayer, and closeness. It might also include simply giving the sick person the least drafty place available. That sounds modest. But modest choices matter when resources are thin. A better corner, a thicker covering, a share of warm drink, or an extra bit of food can become a serious defence. Then there are those who worked hardest. A labourer returning wet, hungry and exhausted enters the night with less stored strength. A servant who slept poorly must still rise early. A mother nursing a child may wake often. A shepherd who stood in wind all day brings cold into the bones. Medieval households did not always have the luxury of fairness. They had necessity, and necessity is not famous for neat arrangements. You listen as someone moves near the hearth. They check the ember mound again, then return to the bedding slowly. Their hands are cold, they slide beneath the blanket, and everyone nearby feels the intrusion. A small ripple of complaint passes through bodies without words. Cold hands are socially powerful. They can ruin diplomacy instantly. A child gives a sleepy protest. The adult whispers something soft, then tucks the hands under their own arms to warm them. This is another kind of shared survival. The body becomes a warmer for another body. Hands warm under sleeves, feet find protected places, backs pressed together, breath gathers under cloth. No one calls this technique. It is simply what people do when cold leaves few options. Some larger households had more formal systems of care. A manor, castle, hospital, or monastery might place vulnerable people in infirmaries, warmer rooms, or sheltered service areas. Charity institutions could house the poor, elderly, or sick. Although provision varied greatly in smaller homes, the system was personal. Care came from whoever was awake, willing, strong enough, or unable to ignore the need. The night grows deeper. Outside, the frost has settled thickly on roof edges and rails. Inside, the most vulnerable are drawn inward. Toward warmth, toward bodies, toward the remembered centre of the fire. This inward motion is almost invisible, but it shapes the room. The child does not sleep near the door. The elder does not lie where the draught slides. The sick are not forgotten beside the cold wall. This is community at the smallest scale. It can be tender. It can be tense. A household under pressure may have arguments, shortages, resentment, and fear. Winter does not automatically make people noble. It merely makes interdependence harder to deny. When the room falls below comfort, every blanket becomes a decision, and every decision reveals the bonds inside the house. You feel the child's warmth against your side. It is faint, steady, and trusting. The old woman's breathing roughens, then steadies again. The cow behind the partition exhales. The embers remain hidden under ash, somewhere beyond the shutter. Ice tightens in the water trough with a tiny sound, like glass remembering itself. Morning is still distant, but the household has arranged itself around risk. It has placed warmth where weakness needs it. It has turned blankets, bodies, broth, herbs, prayers, and watchful listening into a shield. Medieval people survived freezing nights not only because they knew how to build, burn, cook, or mend. They survived because someone noticed who might not endure the cold alone. You settle deeper beneath the wool as the room breathes slowly around you. The cold is still present, waiting along the floor and door, yet near the centre. Small lives and old lives are held close, wrapped in the shared warmth of a household that understands winter's order. The child has settled, the elder has been covered, and the house lies arranged around its most vulnerable sleepers. Still, Not everyone slips easily into dreams. Medieval nights were long in winter, especially when cold made sleep thin. Between the last chores and the first grey hint of dawn, people often lived through hours of half waking, listening, whispering, remembering and telling stories. You feel that wakefulness now. The room is dark except for the dull hidden glow beneath the ash. No flame rises, no candle burns. The air smells of wool, smoke, straw, damp timber, and sleeping bodies. Outside, wind moves softly around the walls, then fades. Inside, someone shifts beneath a blanket. Straw answers with a dry murmur, like a tiny field being walked through in a dream. A familiar part of medieval social life was oral storytelling. News, saints' lives, family memories, local legends, jokes, work songs, riddles, warnings, and moral tales moved through households by voice. Many people could not read, and even among those who could, books were not common bedside companions. Stories carried entertainment, memory, instruction, comfort, and social glue through dark hours. A whisper begins near the hearth. It is not a performance. It is softer than that. Someone tells of a winter long ago when the stream froze so hard that carts crossed it. Someone else murmurs that the tale has grown thicker every year. This is how memory survives. It collects frost, exaggeration, complaint, and pride. A story without a little inflation may feel underdressed. The child, supposedly asleep, listens. Of course, a tale follows about a traveller lost in snow who found shelter by following the smell of smoke. Another story concerns a foolish neighbour who stored damp wood and spent 3 mornings arguing with tinder. People laugh quietly, because laughter must not wake the whole room. The laugh is low, warm and brief. It adds no fuel to the hearth, but somehow the room feels less cold. Small entertainment mattered during winter nights. Riddles could pass time without light. Songs could be remembered when hands were too tired to work. Gossip updated the village map of trust, debt, illness, marriage, quarrel, and livestock behaviour. This was not idle chatter only. Information moved by the fireside. A rumour about bad roads might shape tomorrow's journey. A tale about a failed roof might remind someone to check thatch. You listeners' voices rise and fall. They do not speak continuously. Sleep pulls at them. Cold wakes them. A sleeper coughs, turns, and settles again. The cow breathes behind the partition. Somewhere near the wall, a mouse makes a tiny scratch and then chooses silence. Wisely, the air under the blanket grows warm near your face, while the tip of your nose remains loyal to winter. A less obvious detail is how stories could mark social boundaries. Some tales belong to families, some to villages, some to trades, and some to religious calendars. A pilgrim might bring a miracle story. A merchant might bring news from towns. A servant might know songs from another household. Stories travelled with people, like fleas, but usually more welcome, not always more accurate. The line between fact, warning, joke, and wonder could be sung. A strange light in the marsh, a saint's help in a storm, a wolf near the fields, a miser punished by cold, a generous widow rewarded with fuel. Each tale carried meaning. Medieval listeners did not always require the same kind of proof modern listeners expect. A story could be useful even if it wandered from strict truth. Here the evidence becomes delicate. Written collections preserve romances. Sermons, exemplar, saints' lives, songs, and tales shaped by literate culture. But the exact stories told in a peasant room at midnight usually vanished with the smoke. We hear echoes, not complete conversations. Still, human beings kept talking through winter long before anyone wrote the night down. A woman speaks of a saint's feast day. She remembers when the snow came early that year. The memory folds religious time into weather time, which was common in medieval life. Calendars were full of saints, fasts, feasts, agricultural work, and seasonal expectation. A date was not just a number, it was a name, a task, a smell, a danger, perhaps a song. The older man mutters a proverb. It has something to do with frost, geese, and foolish planning. The wording is difficult, but everyone seems to understand enough to be mildly amused. Proverbs did useful work because they made experience portable. A short line could carry weather advice, moral caution, or a complaint about youth. Youth, naturally, had always been declining. You hear a quiet song next. It is barely sung, more breathed than voiced. The tune moves slowly, perhaps from church, perhaps from work, perhaps from a local memory no scholar could neatly place. The notes do not fill the room, they brush it. The child stops shifting. Someone's breathing deepens. The song softens the cold without denying it. This is one reason the night survives emotionally. Warmth is physical, but fear is also part of cold. Darkness enlarges every sound. Hunger sharpens worry. Illness waits in the breath. A creaking shutter may become a threat. A distant animal call may wake old stories. Tales and songs give shape to unease. They say the night has been endured before. They say others have crossed it and reached morning. A story can be a blanket for the mind. You lie still as another tale begins, then fades halfway through when the teller grows sleepy. No one complains. Medieval storytelling did not always require polished ending. Sometimes the ending was simply a yawn, a cough, and the soft collapse of voice into darkness. The unfinished tale hangs in the room, oddly comforting, because tomorrow someone may finish it differently. The hearth glows faintly under ash. You remember earlier scenes. Fire before darkness, walls patched against drafts, wool layers drawn close, supper warming the belly, animals breathing behind boards, embers guarded like sleeping seeds. Now stories join those survival tools, not because they heat the room, but because they help people remain human inside hardship. In a castle hall, minstrels, servants, guards, and guests might share songs and tales after supper. In a monastery, readings and chants shape night memory differently. In a poor cottage, one whispered tale might be all the entertainment available. On the road, travellers traded news in exchange for lodging or trust. Every shelter had its own soundscape of winter speech. The voices hear thin again. The child has finally slept. The older woman's hand rests near the blanket edge. The man who checked the door gives one last soft laugh at a remembered joke, then grows quiet, beyond the shutter. Frost tightens on the lane. The house returns to breathing, creaking, settling, and listening. You feel drowsiness gather more deeply now. The stories have done their work. They have filled the cold hours with memory, warning, humour, and a little wonder. They have made the room feel less like a shelter under siege and more like a household still alive with voices. The night remains below freezing, but it is no longer empty. It holds songs, proverbs, tales, half-truths, old winters, and sleepy laughter. Beneath woolen smoke, you drift closer to sleep while the last whispered words fade into the dark, as soft as ash settling over embers. The stories fade at last, and the room sinks into the coldest stretch before dawn. This is the hour when sleep feels thinnest. The embers are hidden. The blankets have stopped feeling newly warm. The body has spent much of supper's heat. And the world outside has settled into its deepest freeze. Medieval people knew this hour well. Even if no clock named it kindly, you wake before anyone speaks. At first, you do not know why. The room is dark, thick, and nearly silent. Then your nose feels the cold. Your cheeks feel it too, just above the blanket edge. The wool around your shoulders is warm enough, but the air beyond it has sharpened. You breathe slowly, trying not to invite too much winter under the cover. Even breathing becomes strategy. The straw beneath you has compressed. It no longer feels fluffy or generous. It has taken the shape of sleeping bodies. hips, elbows, knees, and every medieval regret. A person nearby shifts, and the whole bedding answers with a dry whisper. Beyond the partition, the cow exhales softly, warm and damp in the dark. The smell of animal breath reaches you faintly, mixed with smoke, ash, wool, and cold earth. This is the hour when survival becomes visible in small signs. Your feet are still covered. That is good. The child remains between warm bodies. That is better. The older woman's breathing continues, rough but steady. The door does not rattle too strongly. The shutter still holds. The embers, if they live, are silent under ash. Nothing dramatic has happened, which means every earlier task is quietly succeeding. A basic rhythm of winter households was morning recovery after nighttime cooling. Fires had to be revived, water checked, animals fed, clothing warmed or dried, and bodies brought back into motion. Dawn did not erase cold at once. It merely gave people permission to start working against it openly again. The night's survival led directly into morning labour, but dawn has not yet arrived. You lie still and listen for it anyway. The darkness seems slightly thinner near the shutter, but perhaps that is wishful thinking. Medieval nights could feel very long in winter, especially for anyone awake from cold, hunger, illness, or worry. Sleep might come in pieces. People woke, turned, prayed, checked the fire, checked a child, and sank back down. A tiny crack sounds near the door. It may be frost shifting in wood. It may be ice tightening along the threshold. It may be the house expressing an opinion. No one rises at once. Everyone waits to hear whether the sound repeats. It does not. The room relaxes by a degree so small only tired people would notice. The first pale hint of morning finally touches the shutter. Not light exactly, more like the darkness losing confidence. Shapes begin to separate, a beam overhead, a hanging cloak, the outline of a stool. The humped form of someone sleeping under wool. The hearth is still a darker shape on the floor, its ash mound barely visible. You smell cold ashes now, flat and grey beneath the older smoke. Someone stirs. The movement is slow, reluctant, and deeply honest. A hand emerges from a blanket, feels the air, and retreats. This is understandable. The room itself has not warmed. A winter morning begins with betrayal. The bed has become the only reasonable country, and every duty outside it seems politically unstable. Still, someone must rise. The household cannot wait for comfort. Animals need feeding. Fire needs revival. Water must be checked. Tools must be physically found. The day begins not because anyone is ready, but because living things require attention. A man sits up first, shoulders hunched under his cloak. His hair is flattened, his face pale in the weak light, and his expression suggests no gratitude toward morning. A small domestic truth appears in the way clothing is handled. Garments kept under blankets or close to the body are less brutal to put on. Shoes left near the hearth may be cold, but perhaps not frozen. Damp cloth is inspected before being worn. Medieval people used placement as preservation, where an object spent the night could decide whether morning began smoothly or with muttered despair. You sit up too. The cold reaches your back immediately. Wool slips from one shoulder, and the air bites through linen. You pull the cloak around yourself and tuck your hands into your sleeves. The floor waits below, cold as stored moonlight. When your feet touch it, even through wrappings, the chill rises fast. It makes your whole body wake with unnecessary enthusiasm. Near the hearth, the ash mound is opened carefully. A stick moves grey powder aside. For a moment, there is nothing. Then a small red eye appears beneath the ash. Someone leans closer and blows gently. The ember brightens, dim at first, then sharper. Dry tinder is placed near it. A thread of smoke curls upward, thinned and hopeful. The household watches as if this tiny glow were a prince arriving late. It catches. Not grandly, not yet. A little flame licks at straw twist and bark fibre. Then a twig takes, another follows. The room receives its first true sound of morning fire. A fragile crackle that feels larger than it is. Your shoulders loosen. The child wakes and blinks. The older woman murmurs something that might be prayer, relief, or complaint. All three are reasonable. The records rarely describe this emotional moment, because scribes had other interests, but archaeology finds hearths everywhere, and household accounts show the constant importance of fuel. Common sense fills part of the silence. A live ember at dawn saved time, strength, and misery. A dead hearth meant cold fingers, delayed food, and extra labour before the day had properly begun. The flame grows, smoke thickens. Finding its familiar path toward the roof opening, it stings your eyes, and somehow you welcome it. Smoke means fall. Fire means warm drink. Thawing hands. Cooked grain. Dried cloth. And a room becoming human again. The smell of ash changes into the sharper scent of burning twigs. Morning has begun arguing with winter. Outside, the door is unbarred. Cold floods inward when it opens. The yard is pale with frost. Every surface shines faintly. The fence rails, the cart handle, the water trough, the edge of thatch. The air smells clean and severe. Breath rises from the doorway in a white cloud. Somewhere a rooster begins, convinced as usual that the sun depends on his management. The household steps into motion. Someone checks the animals first. The cow is alive, warm, and impatient. That is good news. Straw is stirred. Fodder is given. Water may be iced over and must be broken. The sound of cracking ice carries sharply through the cold yard. Fingers ache around the bucket handle. The animal's breath steams in the dim light, and its large body seems almost miraculous after the night, back inside. Clothing is shaken out. A damp sleeve has dried enough. A shoe is stiff but wearable. A child's wrap is warmed briefly near the fire before being tied. Bowls are set out. The pot is returned. The first food may be thin, simple, and slow, but the promise of it changes the room. People speak more now, not cheerfully. Perhaps. Let us not exaggerate medieval mornings, but voices return the night has been survived. Not conquered, not defeated forever, only passed through. That distinction matters. Medieval people faced freezing nights again and again, with no guarantee that every morning would open safely, yet when dawn came, survival became visible in ordinary movement, rising, blowing embers, feeding animals, breaking ice, warming hands, counting the living, starting again. You stand near the hearth as the first flame steadies. The wool around you smells of smoke and sleep. Your fingers begin to loosen. The child eats a bite of bread. The older woman watches the doorway, where pale winter light creeps across the floor. Outside, the frost remains hard, but it has lost the privacy of darkness. Morning has found the household still breathing. Morning has entered the cottage, and the fire has returned from its buried red seed. Yet the story of the night does not end with one household. As pale light spreads over the frozen village, you look back across every shelter you have passed. Cottage, poor hut, byre, monastery, castle, inn, barn and road all begin to join into one larger picture. Medieval winter survival was never one simple secret. It was a system. You stand near the open doorway and watch frost shine along the lane. Smoke rises from several roofs now, thin and wavering in the cold air. Somewhere a bucket strikes ice, somewhere a door groans open, somewhere a child complains about cold shoes. continuing a tradition as old as shoes. The village wakes slowly, not because it feels ready, but because animals, hunger, work, and weather do not accept excuses. What made survival possible was repetition. Gather fuel, guard it, build walls from local materials, patch gaps before dark, wear wool, cover the head, eat warm food, share bedding, bring animals close when needed, bank embers, watch the vulnerable, listen to weather, tell stories when sleep thins, rise before comfort arrives, then do it again. The strongest evidence from medieval life shows that winter survival depended on household labour as much as architecture. Buildings mattered, but they were never enough alone. Food storage of fuel rights, textile production, animal care, clothing repair, communal sleeping, and daily routines all formed the real defence. A warm night was not bought in one object. It was assembled from many small acts. You step into the yard. The cold grips your face immediately. It smells of ice, smoke, wet straw, dung, and new fire. Your breath arises in a white cloud, then disappears above the frozen path. The sun is not yet strong, it only touches roof edges and fence posts, giving the world a pale outline. Winter morning is beautiful in the way a tax notice may have elegant handwriting. You look toward the byre. The cow stands alive and steaming faintly. That matters. Milk may come, manure will enrich the fields, warm breath filled the night. The animal is not only livestock, but stored future. Medieval households lived inside such connections. A blanket came from sheep, heat came from wood or peat, bread came from grain, mills, ovens, labour, rent, weather, and luck. Nothing stood alone. One unexpected lesson is how much medieval comfort moved through relationships. A neighbour might lend embers, a monastery might shelter a traveller, a servant might carry bedding, a child might be placed between adults. A poor family might survive because someone noticed their smoke had failed. Community did not always feel gentle, but it could be practical enough to save lives. The landscape itself shaped every choice. In wooded regions, winter meant rights to branches, timber, and brush. In peatlands, fuel came from cut earth. In uplands, stone walls held wind but stored cold. In towns, crowded buildings created both warmth and danger. Along roads, shelter depended on inns, barns, churches, monasteries, and human trust. Medieval Europe was too varied for one neat answer, which is inconvenient for summaries and very normal for history. The surviving record leaves gaps, especially around the poorest households. We know a great deal from estate accounts, archaeology, buildings, inventories, images, rules, and written descriptions, yet the exact temperature inside a straw pallet at 3 a.m. is gone. So are many whispers, complaints, and small acts of kindness. History gives us traces, then asks us to listen carefully between them. You remember the coldest hour before dawn? That was when the system proved itself. The walls did not stop all drafts, but slowed them. Wool did not create heat, but held it. Food did not warm the room, but warmed the body. Bedding did not defeat winter, but made a smaller climate. Shared bodies did not remove discomfort, but reduced danger. Embers did not blaze, but endured. Such survival was humble. It did not look like triumph. It looked like a woman checking a child's feet. It looked like a man distrusting damp wood. It looked like an elder keeping a cap on indoors. It looked like straw pushed under a door, broth saved for someone coughing, a cloak laid across knees, a cow guarded through frost, and a small red coal hidden under ash. Medieval people also survived because they accepted winter as work. Modern comfort often hides the labour behind warmth. Heat arrives invisibly through pipes, wires, switches, boilers, grids, and bills that cause their own spiritual frost. In the medieval world, warmth had visible steps. Someone cut, carried, dried, stacked, stirred, patched, cooked, mended, and watched. That visibility changed the meaning of night. When the room cooled, people understood why. When the fire failed, they knew the cost. When bedding stayed dry, gratitude had a texture. When neighbours shared flame, warmth carried social meaning. Nothing about survival below freezing was effortless. Yet effort gave people knowledge. The body learned how to sit, curl, wrap, share, eat, listen, and wait. You walk back toward the hearth. The flame is stronger now, licking around thin sticks. Smoke climbs toward its old escape. The pot waits to be filled. A child holds bread near the warmth without burning it, which is progress. The older woman sits in the best place again, looking both tired and entirely unsurprised by morning. She has lived through this night before in many forms. Beyond this cottage, others are doing the same. Monks move through cloisters after prayer, their wool habits brushing cold stone. Castle servants carry fuel through passageways while guards thaw fingers near the hall. Travellers rise stiffly from haylofts, brushing straw from cloaks. Poor households search ash for embers and count what remains in the food store. The whole medieval world begins again from cold. There is no single invention to admire. There is instead a pattern of endurance. The pattern is woven from materials, habits, bodies, beliefs, and social bonds. It contains smoke and wool, hunger and pottage, discomfort and tenderness. It contains mistakes, because people were tired. It contains humour, because people were human. It contains fear, because cold could kill. It contains patience, because patience was cheaper than fuel. So how did medieval people survive nights below freezing? They survived imperfectly. They survived unevenly. The wealthy survived with more layers, more servants, better bedding, and greater stores. The poor survived closer to danger, with scraps, shared heat, charity, and luck. Institutions survive through rules and supplies. Travellers survived by reaching shelter before darkness fully closed. Everyone survived by preparing before the worst hour arrived. You stand in the growing light and feel the truth of that. Medieval winter was not conquered by warmth alone, but by timing. Gather before dark, eat before sleep, dry before frost, bank before ash cools, shelter the weak before they fail, ask for help before silence becomes dangerous, listen before weather changes, rise before the day is ready. The room behind you fills with morning smoke. The yard ahead glitters with ice. Between them, the household moves slowly into another day, carrying the night's lessons in hands, shoulders, feet, and memory. For now, that is survival, not comfort, not ease, just life continuing, carefully, under a cold medieval sky. And now, as the village grows quieter in your mind, let the hard edges of the morning soften. The frost remains on the fence rails, but you no longer need to step into it. The hearth glows steadily behind you, small and amber, breathing warmth into the room with patient little sounds. Smoke lifts in a thin ribbon, then disappears into the dim rafters. You can let the tasks fade now. No more wood to stack, no more shutters to check, no more cold shoes waiting at the bed's edge. The cow breathes in the byre. The child sleeps again after breakfast. The older woman rests near the fire, her hands folded beneath wool. Outside. The lane lies pale and still, but you are sheltered from it. The medieval night has passed. Its cold, smoke, hunger, prayers, stories, and careful habits drift away like breath in winter air. You may keep only the gentler part, the glow under ash, the warmth beneath blankets, the soft murmur of people gathered close, and the steady knowledge that dawn comes slowly, but it comes. Let the walls grow quiet. Let the wind move far beyond the thatch. Let the fire become a low red circle in the dark. Your body is warm enough now, your breathing can slow, the old village rests, and you may rest with it. Sleep well.